Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. This meeting is being conducted remotely via Zoom webinar per our remote participation policy BEDJA. The following members are in attendance in the auditorium: Evelyn Abaya Isa, Adam Klein, Ginny Kremer, John Peterson, Yeben Wang, and myself. Is that right? Yes. Diane Baum and Kara Cook will be late. Nora Shine and Angie So are absent, and Amy Krishnamurthy and Kira Cook eventually are attending via Zoom. In an ongoing effort to make our meeting as secure as possible, we ask members of the public to view the meeting using ActonTV's YouTube channel found at the top of the agenda. Those who wish to comment during the meeting were asked to register 24 hours prior to the start of the meeting using the link also found at the top of the agenda. These procedures are now posted with our public participation policy BEDH. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on ActonTV's website at actontv.org. Per our remote policy, all votes will be done by roll call. I will call each member's name and they will state how they vote. Thank you for joining us. All right, so we have quite a packed agenda this evening. So when we get to the discussion items after the presentations, and there's a whole lot of interest in the meeting tonight, then we really are going to stick to the one comment or question, and then I'm going to move on, and if we have time, I will come back. I'd also like to take a few minutes just to recognize our fellow school committee member, Kira Cook, and the excellent work that she has been doing thus far this year under tremendous duress. Kira was worried about joining school committee when I first met with her before last year's elections, and she was bound and determined that she was going to do this once she decided, and she has been an excellent member of the committee thus far. She does not serve on any of the major subcommittees, but her work has not gone unnoticed. She co-chairs the Joint PTSO subcommittee with me and has been an integral part of running that meeting. On nights when I couldn't do the heavy lifting, she was able to take on the role of chair and to keep an agenda rolling and to make sure that she emailed all of the members. So her communication skills are excellent, and I just want to say how integral she has been to my experience this year. She's always asking me if there's anything she can do to help, because she knows this year for me has been a challenging one. And I know that she's not here to hear this right now, but I hope that she will watch it after. I just wanted to recognize her in that way and just to say that she's doing an amazing job, and I'm so glad that she's part of the committee. I know, Amy, you had something you wanted to share as well?
Thanks, Tessa. Thanks for giving me the time to do this. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, great. I was appalled at the last select board meeting when, for the second week in a row, the chair chose to use his position and platform to call out Kira Wilson Cook. I know many of you have seen it, and it doesn't deserve any of our time here. But I do want to take a moment and say what an invaluable voice Kira brings to this community and to this committee. She has volunteered her time and energy to our schools and town and has borne numerous attacks with class and grace. Kira is a strong, intelligent, thoughtful woman who has shared unique insights that challenge us all to do better. I'm so very grateful to serve with her. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Okay. We are lucky enough to have our student rep with us tonight. Rick, if you'd like to share, then you'll be promoted.
Hi, Rick.
Hello, everyone. Hi. So today I just wanted to share about myself and some of my peers and teachers' concerns and questions about going back to school in May. So I'm just gonna start with that. So as everyone probably knows, the students are going back full time in May, and even though we're all excited for this opportunity, we have a few questions and concerns about how this is going to look like. First is regarding social distancing and student capacity. So returning back to school it'll be really hard to maintain the 6-foot social distancing standard, as already the school is quite packed. Most classes for most students are already packed to max capacity. with regards to social distance seating. So it's going to be interesting to fit another cohort in these already packed classrooms, and it seems quite difficult to maintain social distancing. Another key point is hallway traffic flow. Even before like at this moment with only one cohort at the school, hallway traffic flow is a little tight, but thinking about how it will happen even after the next cohort comes in with us, it is interesting to consider how this will affect foot traffic and how we will be able to socially distance regarding this. And probably the most important concern is with spacing. Right now, with only one cohort, student hotspots like the cafeteria, gyms, and bathrooms are already packed to full capacity. However, with another cohort being in the school, it doesn't seem feasible to maintain social distancing, as already there's half the available space due to COVID restrictions, and we're going to have to accommodate for twice as many students as we currently do. So just generally regarding social distancing and student capacity is one major concern that students have when returning back full-time in May. Second is about avoiding and spreading or receiving COVID. So right now, about a quarter of the people have been fully vaccinated. However, this is not enough for herd immunity. With a full school of like almost 2,000 kids, it'll be hard to take the temperatures and notice the symptoms in the high school itself. And furthermore, it's going to be harder to keep the air circulating with more people in a classroom. My final point is regarding school capacity. As I said in my first point, certain areas in the school, like the cafeteria, gyms, and bathrooms, are already loaded up and like maxed out because of the social distancing restrictions. And because of this, they've already hit their full capacity. However, having a full school will make it even tighter. We're going to have like about twice as many students for half the amount of space. Another common issue that the school is facing right now is the internet. With half the students logging in every day, every school day, the internet is already quite slow. So another concern is how will students be able to access the internet when the whole school is there working on the school's internet? Like, it'll be even slower. So pretty much all the students are excited to go back to school on May 4th and reunite with our peers from another cohort and hopefully get an idea of how our proper school year would have been. But these are just some questions that the student body is concerned about and would just like to get answered before the period's up.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you for listening.
You're welcome. I appreciate the update from you tonight. Thanks for taking the time to join our meeting. And have a good April vacation. All right, this is the portion of the meeting where we have public participation. If members of the public who are pre-registered would like to speak about an item that is not on the agenda, would they please raise their hands so that they can be recognized for 3 minutes each? And then after, if there are not any people, then Adam has some comments that came into our public comment thing that he's going to read.
Right, it looks like we have one attendee with their hand raised. Sandy, go ahead and unmute yourself. You can talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, here we go. This is both my first time attending and speaking at one of these meetings, so I thank you for giving me the space to share my thoughts. For those of you who don't know me, I am a 5th grade teacher at Douglas. I am a passionate educator and a generally optimistic and positive person. I've been working here in the district for over 10 years now. Recently, I learned about the proposed changes at the district level, and I've learned about proposed changes at the district level, and I'd like to share my thoughts on how those changes will affect the students in my classroom. I hope that my tone conveys the seriousness of what is at stake with this decision. The proposed changes I am referring to are the addition of new coaching positions and the gradual and complete removal of our classroom assistants. While coaches are valuable tools for teachers, losing classroom assistants will significantly and negatively impact the educational experience for students in our classroom. For people who are not working in the classroom, seeing the day-to-day events, it may be hard to understand what a significant loss this will be. So I'd like to present an analogy. Imagine a ship. The captain steers the ship. Even with the best experts sharing navigational strategies, the captain will not be able to successfully sail the ship if there's a hole blown through the hull. Instead, the captain will pour their attention into filling the hole. I think we would all agree in this situation, the best navigational strategies don't seem as high a priority. The captain's focus changes from keeping the ship above water. Similarly, even with the best coaching to guide my teaching practice, with the loss of my classroom assistant, I will not be able to implement those strategies nearly as effectively. Let me assure you directly from a teacher, there is nothing a single teacher can do, even with the best coaches, that will come close to the impact of having assistants supporting our classrooms.
1 minute
They
remaining.
support our classrooms both academically, social, emotionally, through their relationship with our students, because they interact with them on a daily basis. They focus their energy on managing the classroom of students, which allows me to focus my undivided attention on small group targeted instruction. The additional coaches will not be able to provide that level of support to all of our classrooms. I strongly believe that if you truly understood what consequences would precipitate in the wake of this decision, you would agree that this is not the educational environment we want for the children in our classrooms. I'd like to pause for just a few seconds to allow what I've said to sink in.
Thank you, Sandy. Your time is up.
Yep.
All right, I just wanted to take a second, maybe I wasn't clear enough, I need to reiterate that the public participation is for items that are not on the agenda, and the MTSS presentation tonight is on the agenda. So actually, Adam is going to wait to read the comments that came in because they all pertain to that subject. If there is anyone else who would like to speak to something that is not on the agenda, then you may raise your hand. Other comments should wait until that portion of the agenda.
We just have one hand remaining. So Steve, go ahead.
Yes, hi, good evening, school committee. I wasn't going to say anything now because I'm actually interested in the meat of the meeting, but I would like to echo some. I would otherwise echo what I just heard from that teacher, some of the same concerns. But what I wanted to say was that with respect to the issues of the Board of Selectmen in Acton that were mentioned earlier, and Kira Cook in particular, I want to say she's the most amazing person. She's spoken with me as someone who's not even from Acton several times to get input from me, and actually went out of her way to, when the fire happened at Boxborough, to ask me and to assist some neighbors who were affected by that. So we have an amazing leader in our community of Acton-Boxborough, and you know, there's no border between Acton and Boxborough when it comes to Kira Cook. That's all. Thank you.
That's all the hands we have raised.
All right, so if anyone else had comments for things in other parts of the agenda, then when we get to those parts of the agenda, that you may certainly raise your hand and I will call on you to participate then. That brings us to Peter's superintendent's update.
All right, I'm going to go fairly quickly through this tonight. I do want to credit Dawn because most of this is health and COVID related, so she did all of the heavy lifting. But just to start with a positive recognition, a couple of years ago, our district data inquiry team actually worked with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium to pilot, and it was also West Ed, to pilot a data inquiry process to create equity. So after a brief sidestep with COVID, MEC finally got to publish their data inquiry guide for exploring equity issues and solutions, and they actually gave us a shout out on their second page, so that was very nice of them to do that. District travel guidelines. We do want to remind families as we head into break that the district has travel guidelines in place, and so we're encouraging people to review the website, but we will be sending the travel guidelines out to families so people know what the requirements are as they think about returning back to school. Pooled testing, we want to continue to encourage families to sign up for pooled testing. We are still only at 54% of our grades 1 through 6 students. We really are shooting for 80% in order to make that program effective as a surveillance program. So we are going to continue to message out to families that we would like additional families to sign up so that that program is effective. Just to update on pooled testing as well, we will be implementing pooled testing for high school immediately after the vacation and then junior high the week after that. It feels like it might be backwards because junior high is coming back first, but after thinking about it a bit, we think there's actually greater risk among our high school student populations, so we actually want to start the testing at that level first and then go to the junior high. Vaccines for individuals 16 and older, we just want to remind families that April 19th is the date the state is making everyone 16 and older eligible, so we would encourage families to pre-register on the state website. We are also offering a parent and caregiver well-being and social emotional learning workshop series along with Danny's Place Youth Services, and it is also co-sponsored, excuse me, I skipped a line here, some key things that parents might take out of that. What skills should all parents and caregivers have in their toolkit as they navigate the ups and downs of their children's social and emotional development? And how might we better support our children and ourselves through difficult times? So we will be sending out information so that families can pre-register for that, but we would love to get as many people as possible there. And then just a final reminder that Tessa and I are hosting a series of community coffees over the course of this year. Our next one is scheduled for May 5th. It sounds like it's early to be announcing May, but that is only a couple weeks away. So we're hoping to see families there. So thank you very much.
That was so quick, Peter. I didn't even have time to add it to my calendar.
We'll send you the update.
Yeah. Okay. So we're on the cusp of the time that we were going to, so we have to have the thing at 7:30, right?
No, we have Andrew Shen.
Oh, no, I know we do. I'm just saying, like, they're going to have enough time. Yes? Okay. Oh, so we can do the thing after. All right. Yes. Okay. So tonight we have Andrew Shen and Larry Dorey here to present about a potential early release proposal for the junior high and the high school.
So just to preface this before Andrew speaks, you have a memo in your packet from Andrew and Larry. That's the meat of it, but Andrew might just say a couple of words about that, answer any questions that you may have.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Larry,
Great.
Is Larry joining too?
Larry was supposed to be joining me.
Larry, I don't see your name in the attendee list. If you could raise your hand, I'm happy to add you as a panelist.
And while you're doing that, I'll start because I fully appreciate that you have a very full agenda. Hopefully, this particular presentation won't require too much time, but we still appreciate the time that you carved out for us. As Peter mentioned, we submitted a memo. We would like to ask the school committee to consider endorsing a proposal that we have for next year to start out with an early release calendar for the junior high and high school. Obviously, early releases at the elementary level have been a long part of our district's history, and we'd like to extend it in a different way to the junior high and high school. This really is, in a lot of ways, a carryover practice from this year. This is one of those things where it wasn't, part of our plan to think about an early release, but because of this year's conditions, it became something that made a lot of sense. And as we think about moving on from this year, we really do feel like there are a lot of benefits that are separate from the pandemic related to supporting teacher growth, supporting professional learning, and a lot of the goals that we continue to emphasize, both short-term and long-term. And just we think that this provides capacity, and in a lot of ways, just is really emphasizing the importance of the quality of the time that teachers spend with the students by carving out a little bit of it so they can be working with each other to identify shared goals, to work on shared goals, whether that's curriculum oriented, whether that's about student performance, whether that's about shared students. All of those things, I think if we provide consistent time over the course of the year and not just intermittent ones, we have found, and we've also read, and we've also heard from our elementary colleagues that really is important in terms of that consistency. So the details are in the memo. You know, we would look at it as 15 sessions on Mondays. Dismissal would be around 1 o'clock for a 90-minute dismissal. For those who are already wondering, hey, shouldn't we do it on Wednesdays like the elementaries? We would love to. Transportation is something that is a logistical complication because we do share buses, and so our dismissal time would be roughly the same time, so that just isn't available at this point. Perhaps someday we'll come up with some creative methods where we could coordinate and align with the elementaries, but for now, we're looking at Mondays. And the other details, I'll let Larry also just share a little bit, because along with some of the lessons that we learned this year, my understanding is that as they were looking at their schedule and doing a lot of research at the high school for the past few years, even before the pandemic, the idea of embedding professional learning time had already been a topic of conversation. So Larry, if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can actually speak to the last 25 years where teacher collaboration has always been a priority and something that every time we've looked at our schedule, we've tried to build in unsuccessfully. So, I want to thank Andrew and Jim Marcotte and Tina Vaness and Fred Hone, who put a lot of time into this proposal, because it's, in my opinion, is absolutely moving the high school in the right direction. Teachers need time to learn from each other. They need time to talk about students, and it just does not work well during the day. Everyone is obviously in their classrooms and everyone's moving in different directions, and it's hard to bring groups together. That's it.
So we welcome questions, any thoughts or feedback. In the memo, there are some examples, not exhaustive, of some of the topics that we have certainly identified as benefiting from this goal. A couple of weeks ago, we chatted about our math curriculum, K through 12, but certainly our plans at the middle school level to unlevel 7th grade and the importance of carving out time for that heavy lifting. This would be Exhibit A in terms of trying to then invest some time in supporting the teachers in the work that has to be done on that, just as one example.
Thank you both for that. And I see Amy had her hand up first, and then Jenny.
Thanks for that. I have a question at the high school, because it seems really kind of difficult because everybody is doing their own thing at the high school. So what is it you're envisioning that you would have teachers on these early release days meeting with their subject leaders? I can't remember what it's called.
Department leaders?
Yeah, the department leaders. Would they be meeting with that? And then, and would it be all the teachers in that particular department at that time? I guess it feels like it's always so everybody's doing their own thing. Everybody has their own schedule.
Right.
How's that going to work?
Our department leaders hold meetings every month with the entire department, and additional meetings as they're needed. My answer, Amy, is just about all those things. I would love to see new teachers with veteran teachers. We would want teachers teaching the same subject matter to have time to talk about assessment. I would love to see teachers finding time to go down to members of our student services to talk about kids. All of those things and all of those combinations. We've really found it powerful over the years to do when we've been able to bring, different teachers together into disciplinary type of activities and try to calibrate what's going on in one department versus another department. So, I can't think of any combination I wouldn't consider when it comes to bringing teachers together. But when you talk about, how our teachers do a lot of their preparation for classes, they work a lot with each other in smaller groups. So if you teach similar subjects, you get together and you talk about where you're at and what you're trying to improve and those sorts of things.
Thanks, Larry.
Yes.
Jenny?
Thank you. I think this is a fantastic idea, and I think that I hope that many people have a very bigger understanding and appreciation for the work that all our educators do as a result of trying to help their own kids over this past year. And I think that, you know, teachers at the high school are, work really hard and do a lot of stuff on their own time. So I really support carving this out and also giving students a little bit of a break too. Thanks.
John?
I move to approve the proposed early release schedule for RJ Gray and ABRHS for 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
Was there any further discussion or questions? Evelyn?
So I was just curious why Mondays, given that typically most of our holidays fall on Mondays, I worry a little bit about, I'm all for professional development for educators, but I worry that, you know, they may lose a lot of time given that we have a lot of holidays falling on Mondays. Can you shed a little bit of light on why you picked Monday versus another day?
Yeah, no, happy to. A couple of things. One is we actually felt that a couple of reasons. First, you're right that because Mondays do include several holidays, for us, it actually allowed us to not necessarily, to still be able to do kind of an every other week schedule, but without necessarily getting too many early releases and carving into too much of our instructional time. So if you look on the draft calendar, because of the holidays, we're actually at around 15 Mondays where we do the early release. Whereas if you had it on another day where that didn't have as many holidays, you might have ended up naturally at like 18 or 19. And so for us, there was sort of a fine point of, at a certain point, if you carve out too many instructional hours, you start to get into some fuzziness with 990 and instructional time. The other piece about Mondays is that Mondays are naturally the days when we schedule monthly department meetings and staff meetings. So what happens is if sometimes those early releases fall on the same day as the monthly department and staff meetings, if it's useful and if it makes sense, we can combine the time for activities that would benefit from more than 90 minutes. So to give you just one example, the junior high and high school staff, we have to provide training in universal design, UDL training, which is 6 hours long. And ideally it would be not in 90-minute or 60-minute increments, but closer to 2-hour increments. So having that 90 minutes on the same day that you can also then incorporate some of the department or staff meeting time as needed allows us to more comfortably and more, just more comfortably and more easily schedule those activities.
Adam, did you have something else?
I did. My first is a comment, which is I think this is a great idea. I'm definitely in favor of it. My question relates to budget. So I saw in the memo the budget required for this was really just around additional monies for transportation. And I guess my question is, we're proposing significant increase in professional development time for our teachers. Do we have money to support some additional PD programs? And along that lines, have we seen any R&D proposals from teachers for this summer to look at how they might best utilize this time that they're going to get next year?
So I can certainly jump in to that. So yes, some of the bullets allude to the world language work that needs to happen. So they'll start this summer and they'll have a nice time, some time set aside throughout the year because it'll be an iterative process. The same with the 7th grade. We've seen 7th and 8th grade for math, an R&D proposal for teachers at the junior high to continue that work. There's continued work around some of the other DEI work that groups of educators have come together in proposals for. So we do see a lot of the work starting in the summer and then being able to be carried out throughout the year.
Excellent. And I'm assuming then the budget for that is carried under our overarching professional development budget.
Yes, it will. And I think Larry and Andrew also have some professional learning money they might want to kick into. Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Yes.
Amy, did you have an additional question or thought?
Sorry, I'll be really quick. I just give me a thumbs up that you have spoken to your teaching staff and they're all on board with this. If that's true. If not, I mean, like, what's the feedback?
It's everyone on board, Amy, but it's to me it felt pretty good.
Not 100%, not 100%, but just in general. Yeah, of course.
I would say that
Thank you.
Yes, they've been informed of it, and yes, I feel confident saying that staff appreciate and see the value of time to work with each other. I think that they then look to us and say, it's on you to make sure that whatever you plan is viewed as a value and that we can see us implementing it in our classrooms as opposed to a professional learning that they would not see as valuable.
Thank you.
They certainly made that comment.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Are we ready to vote? Just nod. Yes, okay. Adam?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yevon?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you, Andrew and Larry, for attending tonight and presenting us with that. It was great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I will call the FY22 School Choice Program public hearing to order. After any questions or comments, we'll adjourn the hearing and vote in the regular meeting. So, Marie?
Thank you, Tessa. So there is a memo in your packet, and we have kind of a lot of history around school choice. There was a time at which we had 450 students who were school choice students, and we have been gradually reducing the school choice students. We stopped accepting new families 15 to 20 years ago, and so we basically have been opening up just enough seats to accept the siblings of the existing families, and it's taken that long to kind of move our existing choice families through the system. And this is the first year that we do not have any new siblings coming. So we are recommending that the school committee vote to withdraw from the school choice program at this time. Part of the other sort of history around this is that the school committee has really tried to prioritize class size. We've had large class sizes and we've been short on space for many, many years. We've done a really good job of moving from elementary, as an example, average class sizes of 24 to average class sizes of 21 and a half. That's a really big difference. It takes a long time to get there. The same thing is happening now at the junior high and high school as we've had enrollment drops. So that's one of the main reasons, and we've been completely out of space. All of our classrooms are in use throughout the district. So for those reasons, the school committee has worked towards moving out of the school choice program. We do often get phone calls from families wanting to enroll here. When we bring in a family, we get $5,000 per student. As you know, our per pupil costs are about $15,000 per student. We do get supplemental funding if the student is on an IEP, but again, it may not be the amount that basically the cost of the program. So in terms of funding, it doesn't help the budget really to take students, and then when they leave, that money goes away. So it becomes sort of a budget issue as well. I mean, it's certainly, you know, if you took 50 kids and you got some money from that, it can help in the short term because you're not necessarily adding several teachers for 50 kids spread out across the district. But eventually, you need more teachers, and as the kids graduate, you lose the funding. So all of those things taken into account, the biggest of which is space and class size, we would recommend that the school committee vote to withdraw from the school choice program at this time.
Does anyone have any questions? John?
Is the motion to withdraw simply for FY22, and then we would still in FY23 come back to this question?
You could come back in any year and decide to re-enter the school choice program, but once you've taken the vote, you don't need to take another vote unless you want to change the status.
There's a public question? Okay.
Catherine, you're free to talk if you've got a question about the school choice program. Catherine, if you've got a question about this, feel free to unmute and go ahead and ask.
Hi, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Kate Schiebler, and I've been an upper elementary teacher at Merriam for over a decade. I'm incredibly concerned by the decision to remove classroom assistants.
Hey,
while I
me,
also
Kate,
believe classroom assistants.
Excuse me, Kate. The topic that we're taking public comments for right now is in regards to the school choice program. If you've got comments you want to make regarding the MTSS proposal, you have to wait until that part of the agenda, please.
Okay, I'm just confused then. I was brought up as to unmute. If this isn't the time, how do I know when it is the time?
Yeah, we'll ask the folks to raise their hand at that time. You were brought up because your hand was raised, so we thought you had a comment.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That was my mistake. Sorry.
All right, thank you.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll move to adjourn the public hearing.
Second.
Adam?
Yes?
John?
Yes.
Yeben?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, the public hearing is adjourned. And now I will entertain a motion about school choice.
I move to withdraw from the school choice program due to class size and space limitations. Existing school choice students will remain through graduation when they exit.
Second.
Okay. Adam?
Yes.
Sorry, John?
Yes.
Yeben?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right, that passes unanimously. Sorry about the confusion. Thank you. So, now that we're back in the regular meeting, we have our multi-tiered system of support presentation. So, Peter.
Okay, there we go. So, thank you for your patience while we got rolling. This is the first of two agenda items that I think clearly has a lot of interest in our community and in our schools. So we're coming to you tonight, and we want to talk about a multi-tier system of support in our schools. This has been something that has been on our radar and a strategic objective of our district to be able to move toward and implement for at least the last 5 years. Going back historically, response to intervention was maybe the first iteration that people heard about in terms of ways that schools should support, and it came out of federal legislation around IDEA in 2000. The district chose not to adopt a response to intervention model at the time and kind of skipped over that as a district. And so it's a system that we have not had built out, and it's something that most schools have. It's actually kind of a standard way of doing school at this point. And as we think about coming back, we think that that's very important. I just want to highlight, this was the draft strategy that you've had, and we're hoping to finish off this year and be able to launch. But really 4 of the strategic initiatives in this area around equitable opportunities and outcomes are all linked in to having an MTSS system in our district built out. I'm going to play a short video that's an introduction to what MTSS is, not only for you here. I think you've done some of the reading now that in the packet, but just to make sure everyone at home also has an opportunity to understand what we're talking about.
Grammarly can help you write quickly and confidently, so you never have to slow down at work. Stay on top of emails.
Hi, I am Dr. Katie Novak, and I am here to help you unpack the new MTSS visual, which is a part of the Massachusetts State MTSS Blueprint. And when you're looking at this visual, a lot of the times you're just like, where do I start? And with this blueprint, you're going to start from the outside and you're going to work your way in. Now, all of us probably recognize that structure in the middle, which is the three-tiered structure, where we talk about Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And the whole focus of an MTSS system is to create the strongest Tier 1 or foundation base possible, so all students can access a Tier 1 instruction in academics, behavior, and social emotional learning that meets their needs. Now, we acknowledge that for some students, they're going to need something in addition to that. We don't want to provide them with Tier 2 or Tier 3 services instead of Tier 1, but we want to make sure that we have a strong Tier 1 so that when we provide them with targeted intervention and support, it will truly allow them all to be able to make great progress and to become future ready. So in Massachusetts, most of our students have very, very strong outcomes, and we're actually leading the nation. The reality is that for some students, they're not making the same growth as their peers, and that is not because students are disabled, but rather because our systems are disabled. And so when you're thinking about that inner structure, that three-tiered structure, I want you to think about a snowman, because a snowman doesn't exist without a really strong foundational base. And so when you're thinking about building a system, you want to first focus on that foundation. You will never intervention your way out of a weak Tier 1 instruction for all students. So in order to do that, you have to make sure that that foundation is truly universally designed and provides equitable access to all students. Universal design for learning is about providing multiple means of engagement, action and expression, and representation in order to eliminate the barriers that prevent some students from being able to be really successful in that Tier 1 environment. And equitable access, if we unpack that term, basically means access means every single student has a seat in the classroom. That is access. Equitable means the kid gets that seat in the classroom regardless of whether they have an IEP, whether they're an English language learner. But to provide equitable access to all students, we do need that Tier 1 to be universally designed. We also need to make sure that Tier 1 is very rich with progress monitoring tools and diagnostic assessments and universal screeners, so we know when students are going to need supplemental targeted intervention and support. So if we zoom out, what you'll see is to make this structure in the middle be effective, we have to actually work from the outside in. Now, with a snowman, it doesn't matter how badly you want to build the snowman, everything in the environment has to be right for it to work. You need to have the right temperature, you need to have the right kind of snow, you need to have the right kind of materials. If you want to make a really big, really impressive snowman, you have to have a bunch of shared responsibility for making it, because you can't just pick up that giant snowman stomach on your own. And so it really is a team effort to create a really great snowman, and there's a lot of environmental factors. Now, in this MTSS blueprint, we call all those factors on the outside drivers. And those drivers are what create a system that allow for the universal design of academics, behavior, and social emotional learning within Tier 1, and also a really robust data culture so we can provide Tier 2 and Tier 3 services in a very flexible way. And so to do that, we have to unpack what those drivers are. Now, if I'm building a snowman, we already talked about, we need some sort of systems implementation drivers, which are things like we need the right kind of weather, we need the right kind of snow. And when we're thinking about teaching and learning, we need the right curriculum. We need the right database decision-making tools. We need the right schedule. We need to have, the right staffing. Those are the environmental factors that a multi-tiered system addresses. Also, we need to have really strong leadership in schools that create shared responsibility and really build a culture that's about meeting the needs of all students. It's about building collective efficacy and working together to make decisions. And the same is true if we want to make our really amazing snowman, is we all have to be on the same page about our vision, about what we need to do moving forward. We have to provide each other with feedback, and we have to make sure that all of us are involved in actually creating a system that works for all. And then the last aspect here is this whole aspect of capacity, building competency and capacity. And that is, how do we actually teach in a way that is universally designed? How do we meet the needs of all learners academically, behaviorally, and socially, emotionally? How do we create a system where all educators understand what it means to teach all students. And to do that, we need to focus on our professional development, our teacher induction programs, EdEval, and also distributed leadership, and talking about things like peer review and pineapple charts and instructional rounds. So again, as I said at the beginning, we're going to build this from the outside in. The first thing we want to do is look at all the drivers and see which ones in our district or school may be barriers that will prevent the really, really rich development of that three-tiered structure in the middle. Once we know that all of those different drivers are in place, we can begin to make really great decisions about how we're going to provide equitable access to all students in universally designed classrooms, academically, behaviorally, and socially emotionally. And when we do that, when Tier 1 truly becomes the least restrictive environment for all students, then we can provide students with more instead of to provide them with the targeted and the intensive support they need until data shows us that they actually can have all their needs met in that Tier 1 classroom with their peers.
So,
hi, I am Dr. Katie Novak, and I am here to talk about the importance of every school and district.
I think we heard enough of Dr. Novak. We do believe that if we take the time and we align all of our resources and services across the general education environment through this tiered system, that we're going to end up ensuring that all of our students have access to equitable opportunities and outcomes, regardless of gender, socioeconomic status, race, disability, gender identity, or other differentiating characteristics. And that is the theory that we're working on, that this is really the key to moving forward in that direction. So why now, I think, is a logical question to ask. So this was the first statement out of the Massachusetts Tiered System of Supports Blueprint. And I think what struck us about this is if you took out the words Massachusetts, you could actually insert Acton-Boxborough, and it would still be true. You know, all students are capable of success. While we lead the nation in performance on multiple measures, we still have students who are not experiencing the success they deserve. And that is true for our district as well. This was taken from a presentation that we went to offered by District Management Council thinking about learning coming back from the pandemic. And I like the way they phrased this because what they talked about is there's always some type of a curve associated with learning. And it's not that we're expecting all students to have struggled during the pandemic, but what we know is going to happen is that students are going to have a wider range of needs.
Amy says she can't hear you. Your voice is really quiet. She's getting messages from others.
So we're going to have a wider range of student needs coming back from the pandemic, and one of the first tasks is to really understand what those needs are, and it brings a sense of urgency to making sure that we have systems of support in place for our students.
So the data from our initial fall 2020 iReady assessment indicated that significant numbers of students were performing at least one grade level below benchmark in literacy and mathematics. So these data, just as an overall context, should be viewed with some caution, though, as they represent a single data point. They were the result of a pilot implementation of this new district-wide assessment. Some students participated in the assessment remotely, which impacted their achievement. And the assessment was given a little over a month after students had returned from a 6-month school closure. Additionally, as you know, we feel very strongly that no one assessment captures all that students should know and be able to do in a discipline, and should always be used in conjunction with other assessments. However, this collection of data represents an important first step in developing a district-wide understanding of how our students perform, and that can inform decisions around supporting students in a more systemic fashion. So this slide shows the overall placement of our students in grades 1 through 8 for the literacy assessment. And the yellow indicates that 24%, or 728 of our students, were 1 grade below, 6%, or 166 students, were 2 grades below, and 4%, or 116 students, were 3 or more grades below. To further contextualize this data a bit, the iReady national data for grades 2 and 3 in the fall showed that 25 to 30% of students were 2 or more years below grade level. And so while ours is only 10%, it still indicates that overall almost 1,000 students or a little bit more were 1 or more grades below grade level. The next slide, for mathematics, and this was for grades 1 through 6, we had 40% or 869 students 1 grade below, 7% or 160 students were 2 or more grade levels below, and 3% or 66 students were 3 or more grade levels below. This is consistent with national data in that students are struggling more during the early spring months of the pandemic with mathematics than they were with reading. The iReady national data for grades 2 and 3 showed that 30 to 33% of students were 2 or more years below grade level.
According to the U.S. Department of Education, disproportionate representation occurs when districts identify, place in more restrictive settings, or discipline children from any group at markedly higher rates than their peers. Some examples of disproportionate representation at AB include 16%, well, so 16% of all of our students have an IEP. That's not disproportionate when you look at the state data. Of the 33% of students who are Black have an IEP. 23% of students who are Latinx have an IEP. 20% of students who are white have an IEP. 7.5% of students who are Asian have an IEP. And 30% of students from low socioeconomic backgrounds have an IEP. In addition, 25% of our English learners have an IEP, and of those English learners, 23% are identified with a communication disability. Deb had shared this slide, or maybe just I think the statistics from it in the mathematics presentation a few weeks earlier. But in one of our courses, when you look at all of our grade 9 students who are currently enrolled in a mathematics course, there are 405 of them. In our College Prep 1 level mathematics class, of the 22 students in that course, 63% are boys, 27% are Hispanic, 68% are of low economic status, and 81% have an IEP. And that's in the orange is the percentage of total 9th graders who are taking math. So you can see the percentage in that particular class compared to the percentage overall in the general population. I'm going to turn it over to Debbie Dixon for a couple minutes here. She's been really diving deeply into disproportionality. We've been doing a lot of work with DESE around that, and she has some additional information that she will share.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. The district has had a 3-year trend of disproportionality in the identification of Black students with communication disabilities. And as such, we've been cited by the Department of Education in this area and invited to participate in a professional learning community over the course of this year to dive in a little bit deeper and take a look at what the root cause was for this disproportionality. And I'd like to credit Lannon Toomey, the speech and language chair in our district, Heather Stauch, the elementary psych chair, and Marianne Young, who had also done a lot of work with this. And what we determined was that the district PLC's team explored who these Black students were and when they were evaluated and why we were identifying communication disability. And what we determined was that there was what we found, there's a higher identification of communication disability than any other disability in the district. This is inconsistent with state and federal averages. 22% of the multilingual learners are identified with disabilities, while the overall average district percentage was 16%, as you saw. 43% of English language learners were identified with a communication disability, and the majority of the English language learners are Black or Brown students. 50% of the students who are African American have a language other than English spoken at home. And further analysis was that when we did an historical review, was that these students were referred within 1 year of arriving in Acton-Boxborough. So as we explored this data with our PLC of communities who were in similar situation, and these were communities like Wellesley and Cambridge and Grafton and a number of other communities were working with us. We all determined that we needed to work on our tiered systems of support and our instructional support teams to do a better job at providing equitable access and supports to children who are struggling, and that the answer is not a direct movement to special education and wrongly identifying language barriers as disabilities. So we continue to do our work. Just last week, we attended a day-long disproportionality conference where Katie Novak spoke again. And I think the takeaway was that we need, where she did once again speak about MTSS in light of disproportionality, and talked about this is the right way to do school, and this is the right thing to do for our students. And it continues to be eye-opening, and it continues to be the right thing to do for our students.
Thanks, Debbie. It sounds like we need to coordinate our data. I have slightly different numbers, although I pulled mine yesterday from Power School, so that could also be why I know that some of the data was older.
My data might be a bit older, yes.
It's all good. We'll get it together. Thank you so much for sharing that additional information and a little bit more about the work. The only way that we can successfully move the needle for disproportionality and achievement for all is through a research-based, integrated, and school-wide approach where everyone owns part of the challenge and everyone believes that big changes in growth can occur. This is a systemic problem that requires a systemic solution.
So as you've already heard Dr. Novak speak to MTSS and what it is, I'll just reiterate that it is a systemic and systematic approach that puts the onus on the system, not the student. It's proactive in meeting the needs of every student. And we really can't emphasize that piece enough, that it also utilizes data decision-making, progress monitoring, and evidence-based supports and strategies. You've also already heard about the symbol and this graphic. So I'll just add that the tiers of the building represent the instruction and the support, or more specifically, the instruction or intervention approach, and the intensity and duration of that instruction or intervention. There is movement among the tiers. The tiers are fluid. Additionally, students with disabilities receive services at all levels, depending on need. Some students with disabilities may not need Tier 3 support, and a student not identified with a disability may in fact require Tier 3 supports. It's also critical to state that MTSS is not meant to prevent referrals to special education, but rather to ensure that all referrals are appropriate. The needed drivers to make the system work that are captured in the categories of competency, leadership, and implementation, you'll hear more about them later in the presentation in the work that we need to do going forward.
So in 2017, we had a district review for MTSS, and in the spring, I believe April or May, Dr. George Batch actually joined the school committee and presented to them about a number of these things in terms of what the big takeaways were from the district review after meeting with a number of general education teachers, parents, special education teachers, and other related service providers throughout the district. And what they found, a variety of inconsistencies across the district that included few strategic or intensive intervention services available in general education, a lack of sufficient and universally designed core instruction, a lack of expectations for general education teachers to support the instructional needs of all students, curriculum used to ensure students attain or exceed state standards and the degree to which instruction is aligned with those standards, dedicated support and resources for general educators to build their capacity, inconsistency in the processes for child study and student study teams, a lack of a common language, common understanding of eligibility criteria for special education, and evidence of student learning and its use to assess student progress towards standards.
And if I can just make one quick comment on this, this has been previously presented to school committee. And actually, I think you've heard Diane Baum comment on this several times over the last couple of years. And when she refers to that MTSS study, this was the study that she referred to.
So a number of initial steps that we've taken since then to really think about universal classroom practices include professional learning in UDL, Universal Design for Learning, our SEED work, co-teaching. We've added coaching staff, been working on new curriculum unit development, and adding screening tools. Many of these are by no means consistently implemented with fidelity or embedded within our cultures and habits yet, which is why coaching will continue to be critical as we move forward.
So as we've been thinking of building this out over the last several years, we have added several positions that speak directly to this MTSS model. We added a literacy and social studies curriculum coordinator in 2018. We added 2 STEAM coaches in 2019 and another STEAM coach in 2020. We're focused on the academic side of the tiered system tonight, but I just want to recognize we've also worked to build out all of our different supports in our schools, really since regionalization. So this slide is a summary of the types of support services that we've added since regionalization. We have added 8 English language educators since we became one unified district. We've added 20.5 special educators, almost 3 full-time BCBAs, 7.5, almost 8 counselors, adjustment counselors, social workers, or psychologists. And then we also have an annual contract for about $128,000 for wraparound services for students and families who require support accessing out-of-school services as well. And then we've also added a library media specialist and a digital literacy coach and specialist as well. So it's really been building out all of the types of supports. But I think one thing that we've seen, and we've talked about the disproportionality data, if you look carefully at that George Batch report, he talks about disproportionality as well, and that was going back 5 years. And we presented our current data. We have not moved the needle on that data over this period of time. And so as we were thinking through how we wanted to approach continuing to support students as we move forward, we need a little bit different strategy. And I think one of the things that has led to maybe the over-identification and referral, I think all of our teams and schools want to do the best for every student, and that has been apparent since I've been here. I think the challenge we have, if we don't have all of the right types of supports built into our general education environment, then special education becomes the only place in town where we do have these supports. And we should be able to guarantee every child who enters this district that regardless of what their needs are, we can meet them. And we should primarily be able to meet all students' needs in the general education environment. And then if we can't there, then it's appropriate to be able to refer out into special education as well. So it's really about making sure that our general education environment and special education environments can speak to each other and align in a unified and coherent way.
So what are some of the proposed changes? This slide outlines the proposed positions. You'll see they're in purple. That's Peter's alliteration, the purple proposed positions, to create the MTSS teams at each school. The blue box illustrates at the top that there are coordinators at the district level who will meet and work with the specialists and coaches for coordination across the district. The left side speaks to literacy. the right side to STEAM, and then more specifically to mathematics. The position layout is not intended to be hierarchical in terms of supervision and evaluation, but just merely to show where the needed positions are. Our proposal includes adding 3 literacy coaches to be shared between 2 schools, such as the special ed coordinators are now, 3 STEAM coaches, so that there's 1 for each elementary school, and 3 mathematics specialists, again, to be shared between 2 schools. We have drafted the roles and responsibilities of these positions and will continue to further define them with additional stakeholder input. So as we began to think about our students returning in the fall, our goal is to increase the number of students performing at or above grade level by increasing proficiency in identified critical standards, those that we identified in early September. To move students from X to Y, we need to add the intended conditions and these intentional conditions: a data-informed system, time, and specifically time for collaboration, permission to try new and innovative approaches, and to be solution-oriented. The MTS teams will consist of the various roles that are outlined in the green box, 8 to 10-week cycles of implementation coupled with progress monitoring will enable teams of educators to make decisions about the degree of support specific students will need. And then what will look differently because we've done this? MTSS, again, is rooted in proactivity with decisions informed by school and by student data. Implementation occurs school-wide as educators collaborate. So what will look different is a focus on solutions with measurable outcomes.
How will this be funded? We come to you with a proposal that is budget neutral. It does not add cost to the budget in the short term or the long term. This is a pretty significant investment, and yet we're going to have to make some sacrifices and some trade-offs in order to make this happen. In so doing, we will be shifting some current resources to new priorities. We are also proposing using some of the federal stimulus money that we will be receiving over 2 years to offset the cost shifts and allow us to be ready to do this sooner. The proposed costs are on this chart. As Deb said, we have 3 elementary math specialists, 3 literacy coaches, 3 STEAM coaches projected to be hired for this initiative. A total of 9 certified staff members. We put in sort of an average amount of health insurance based on the number of people who tend to take it at various points in time. You'll notice these salaries are a little higher than the typical salary we put forward for a new teaching position, which is more like $60,000, as these are educators with higher levels of experience. The total cost for this initiative would be $834,000. On our next slide, we talk about how we're proposing funding it. We have applied for a competitive grant from the Department of Education. It's a grant on early literacy, and it would provide $100,000 that could go directly towards the literacy coaches. We have a couple of positions at the high school that are leaving, and due to reduced enrollment, we can afford to not replace those 2 positions. We have elementary math assistants. Each school has a 19-hour elementary math assistant. We are proposing that we reduce those positions, and remember, instead of having a 19-hour math assistant in a school, we will have a math specialist certified. The next piece is very difficult, and we've heard a lot of feedback, and we understand where our staff is coming from. We are proposing over the next 3 years to gradually eliminate classroom assistants in the upper grades, grades 4, 5, and 6. The way this would work is next year we would eliminate grade 6 classroom assistants. We currently have 12 hours in each classroom in each grade. The following year we would reduce grade 5, and the year after would be grade 4. Each year that would reduce our cost by $170,000. Do you mind backing up a couple slides? So altogether, that gets us $836,000, and it would cover the costs of the new positions. And the part I didn't say was we were going to use some ESSER money in between. Sorry about that. So we could reduce grade 6 in the first year, and we would fund grades 4 and 5 through ESSER money. And then the next year, we would fund grade 4 through ESSER money until we eliminate all 3 grades. The proposal is to use about $500,000 of ESSER money. ESSER is the next round of stimulus, and we're projected to get $750,000 to $1 million. So this would use up about $500,000. This chart with current staffing levels is really interesting. I don't want to spend too much time because I know it's a long presentation here. The orange bar is Acton-Boxborough. The left-hand chart are teachers. The right-hand chart are paraprofessionals or assistants. They separate out special ed and general ed. So special ed are the bars at the top. So if you look at the teacher chart, and this is compared to a number of our comparable districts, where we are for teachers is lower than everybody except for Belmont. That's with and without special ed teachers. So we're the lowest except for Belmont, Westboro. No, not Westboro, sorry. Wachusett is fairly close to us. So the bottom of the bar is regular ed teachers, and that lighter orange part is special ed teachers, and we're lower. The state average is on the right, we're lower than that. If you go over to the right-hand side, the paraprofessionals, so these are assistants. Look at the regular ed assistants at the bottom. We are higher than any other district, and in fact, dramatically higher than most districts. So we're the only other two that have any sort of substantial amount of regular ed assistants are Bedford and Westboro, and we're still higher than them. And then the special ed assistants are above that, and altogether we're higher than everybody. So you can see we're quite disproportionate compared to other school districts. We have fewer teachers and many more paraprofessionals. And this last chart you already saw. So this kind of talks through the ESSER funding. So again, next year we'd eliminate grade 6, fund 4 and 5 through the ESSER money. The following year, 22-23, we'd eliminate grade 5. And 3 years from now, we'd eliminate grade 4.
So as we think about moving forward, we would certainly have some next steps. We're at a time of year where, job hunting is on, I think, the forefront of everyone's mind. So, the immediate next step would be to post anticipated positions so that we can start collecting, interest and resumes from potential coaches, specialists, and have that pipeline ready to go. We foresee initiating a couple of sprint cycles, and we talked about that actually when we were planning for the return to school this year, about working in short cycles with some really targeted goals. Some of the initial plans for how we want to approach this, we're thinking having a group working on a data plan and how we're going to use data and the types of data our teams across all of the schools would use, a plan for rolling out professional learning, another plan to talk about the process forms and family engagement strategies that need to be in place for this, and then another one to talk about how the schedules work to enable these teams to meet and actually be able to provide the services effectively for students. So there's certainly a lot of work to be done. We know that anything we start now isn't going to be perfect when we roll it out in the fall, but we believe by getting close enough to jumpstart, it's something that we can begin really a new way of thinking about supporting students in the fall, and continue to build that over the course of next year. As we think about implementation in the fall, some big ideas that certainly are on our mind is how do we plan for effective leadership of the program and make sure that we have alignment between district and school leaders and coaches and specialists to make sure that we're effective in supporting what needs to happen in every school. We have to be thinking about more professional learning in the fall, and then thinking about kind of initiating that first round of assessment and data collection so that then our teams can begin their work. As we think about the flow of a year, this is very, very initial and needs to be flexible as we think about it, but I wanted to give you a sense of how a year might look in this type of a model. Spring and summer, we already talked about this. We would be doing extensive professional learning for our leadership teams as we close out this school year, but also really thinking about what needs to happen over the summer. The retreat would certainly be focused on this rollout and so that we start the year effectively. District-wide and school-based implementation plans for each school to be talking about the various modules that I just mentioned on the previous slide. Professional learning in the fall, have that first round of student assessment, begin kind of that school and grade level goal setting for groups of students and individual students, and then initiate that first cycle of intervention would be kind of the goal of the fall. In winter, we'd be moving on to a second cycle that, remember, Deb talked about 8 to 10 week cycles. We would have that opportunity for mid-year assessment data collection analysis and allow school and grade level teams to look back on the progress students have made to date and be able to think about whether or not goals need to be adjusted as they think about the second half of the year. And then in spring, entering into the third cycle of supports, an end of year data collection, really assessing program against some of our established goals, reporting out on the progress of the program, and then revising it again. This is going to have to be an iterative process. This will not be built in a day. We know it's going to take a while. You know, just to talk a little bit about planning, one thing we kept thinking about as a leadership team, we talked about going slower and trying to add these positions gradually over time, and maybe instead just focusing on starting a process and building out the data teams and everything else. But the challenge we kept facing is if you build out really good and effective data teams, at some point they're going to have to say, well, we need interventions that we can put in place for students. And if we don't have the interventions when the data teams are ready to go, then it's kind of like a chicken and an egg waiting to happen. If you kind of need both in order to really make that progress. We wanted to give you some proposed goals by which we would assess the program. We did not put in percentages in here because we only have one, kind of round of data collection through iReady. That is a new system for us, and we felt like anything we would put in here now for a percentage would be inherently very unreliable. Whereas if we wait until we get through spring and then even next fall, potentially, we would then have 3 different data points by which to have a better sense of how our students progressed over time, and that would be a much more reliable goal moving forward. But certainly one of our goals would be able to move some percentage of our students over the course of next year to be able to perform at or above grade level on their end of year assessments. iReady is a new system for us, but I do see that we're going to commit to that for a period of time. We want to get feedback from our teachers about that in terms of how we can continue to be more effective in implementing it and supporting use. But that is an important step forward to have a district-wide data system, because until we do, at the district level, we can't think about becoming more solution-oriented until we have a consistent set of data that we can look at across our schools. Another goal that we wanted to think about, which is a little different than just saying so many students might be proficient, is to look at annual growth targets for students. And iReady does a nice job of bringing this in, where students, you can actually see the types of growth they need to make on different standards in both literacy and mathematics, but be able to set a certain percentage of our students to meet their annual, typical growth targets, and then also set some percentage of students that we'd like to see meet stretch growth targets. We also want to be thinking long and short term about disproportionality. We've talked about that at length, and we want to be action oriented on that. So, being able to say that we're going to impact disproportionality in special education in the short term is not realistic, and it wouldn't be effective. You can't all of a sudden just decide you're going to exit a large population of students out of special education services, but we do think that the entry point to that is actually going to be talking about looking at our referral processes and looking for proportionality in the referral process, particularly among subgroups, and make sure that when we do have referrals into special education, they are appropriately made. Long-term, some goals of having this program is to decrease the disproportionate representation of certain subgroups, and we also think that by having a really effective system of supports at the elementary level, we're also working toward another one of our goals as a district of increasing the student representation in advanced coursework at the secondary level, which is another goal of ours, because these are all linked together. There's no one piece of data lives in isolation. So just to give you a sense, we are thinking through how we would think about the effectiveness of this. These are all single data points. It's still early in the process. Some of this could shift and change as we work through it more, but I do want to give you a sense that we are thinking now about how we'll know whether or not we're successful. Just to summarize a little bit, this has been identified priority for the district for some time now. As we talked about before, we've been working on this. We have not seen our data move significantly, despite some of our efforts to add staff in targeted areas, and that's leading us to believe that we need a bit of a change of strategy for how we're going to achieve that. The pandemic certainly plays into the sense of urgency we have about moving this forward at this time. We know it's an incredibly challenging time to be making changes, particularly for educators, and we recognize that, but we also know that if we're going to effectively support students coming back and meet the variety of needs, we're going to have to think a little bit differently. The pandemic also provides a funding opportunity in terms of federal stimulus. If we were not to do this now, we wouldn't have stimulus money available to kind of soften the path of doing this, and we would have to look at maybe more abrupt changes over time. I think one of the overarching challenges we've seen as a district is we do not have the same level of funding as many of our peer districts do. I did reach out anecdotally to a number of the districts, including Needham, Wellesley, Concord, Carlisle, to see if they had classroom assistants at which grade levels. None of them actually have classroom assistants in their upper elementary grades. So we really are one of the standout districts in that regard, and I'm not seeing that that's a consistent pattern across districts at this point. But I think making an abrupt change coming out of the pandemic is going to be challenging. However, when I think about, really what do students need coming out of this, and if we have to make any change, I do believe at the 6th grade level, and we think about 6th graders in our district in elementary school, but in most districts, these are middle school students at this point. Most of our schools rotate classes over the course of the day in 6th grade, so having a consistent, classroom assistant time is not necessarily the same as it is in the younger grades. It doesn't mean there's less value to it than in the younger grades, but the ability of students to be able to move forward, we think is sound. And then I think, just this overall increased awareness of educators, of teaching and learning decisions for students. Our educators have done a tremendous job coming out of this pandemic. I don't want to paint this at all, and I heard Amy ask the question before of Larry and Andrew, please tell me the educators are on board with this. This is not going to be a proposal that's going to be resoundingly popular with educators, because we're really looking at a shift in strategy that's been in place at Acton-Boxborough probably for the better part of 25 or 30 years that we've had this level of classroom assistance. I want to recognize that and make sure I speak to that and understand how seriously we take this. I wish our district had this system in place years ago and that we had this built out and this was our operating norm. I also wish that we had, $22,000 a year per student, like some of the comparable districts we're often compared to, because that would be tens of millions of dollars more money than we actually have. And, like Dave came into my office the other day and he was looking at comparable communities and he said, geez, if we only had $1,000 more per student, that would be like $5.4 million. And we're talking about 800,000, but at our funding level, 800,000 is an insurmountable change in a given year. So that's really the idea of being able to leverage some of the timeliness of this with the federal stimulus to make that change now so we can soften the path to do this. So I recognize it's a challenge. I recognize it's a proposal that's looking at a shift in strategy. And I'm really just, looking for feedback from the committee so that we can think about next steps.
All right, so as we begin this discussion, I know that there are plenty of people watching that have comments, and I know Adam has some comments that he can read, but as we do with generally big discussions, we discuss amongst the committee first. I also just want to remind you that this is not a vote. This is an operational item that the district is bringing us the information about and sharing in deep, with lots of details about what they're going to do, but operationally, this is not something that we need to vote on. We're just here to ask questions and discuss and pick through and understand all of the information that was provided to us. So with that, we can open discussion. Ginny, go ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate the MTSS. It's a really interesting way of rethinking the way we understand special ed and supporting students. And I also understand that despite the best efforts of everybody concerned, we haven't moved the needle on disproportionality. But I just want to say that, you know, in Acton, sixth graders are in the elementary schools, and sixth grade teachers are expected to get them all, you know, ready for a big change to the junior high. And there is a ton of work that goes into that. So, you know, my kids only went to one of our 6 elementary schools, but I know how involved the assistant teachers were in all of that work. And I can't really imagine asking a 6th grade teacher to do that all by themselves. And I don't really understand that, you know, while MTSS is great, I'm missing the piece where you say, and so this coach is going to perform these functions and support the teachers and the students in this way, rather than, are you just having more people sitting in offices, you know, thinking big thoughts. I didn't see anywhere, and maybe I missed it, what these folks are actually going to be doing to support teachers and students, and at the same time you're funding them by taking away somebody who's standing there every day assisting the teacher and the students. So, you know, 4th through 6th grade, a lot of work happens, a lot of growth happens for kids in those years. So, you know, I don't love having, you know, to frame that way. And I also note in closing that another thing we could be doing with this federal stimulus money is moving towards universal early childhood education, and certainly universal kindergarten, which we've been told we have to step away from because of the pandemic. So that's really disappointing, because I think that that's something that could make, you know, enormous change for all of our kids going forward. Thank you.
Sure. And we could speak to that if you want to. Okay.
Evelyn?
Yeah, so I just want to echo Jeannie's points, and I am struggling with this one as well. I think that the MTSS is a great program. I think we need it. What I'm struggling with is the intangibles that we can measure, right? With having a teacher's assistant in the classrooms and the benefit that they bring to the kids. And by removing them, how does that really affect the kids? I understand the benefits of the specialists, but I'm struggling with the benefits of having an assistant in the class for, especially for 4th, 5th, and 6th grades.
Before our discussion goes further, I just really the hardest part about all of this, I think, is that we have 6 different elementary schools, and the experience at those elementary schools is entirely different between elementary schools. So I listened to what Ginny was saying. I mean, the truth is, so right now, everybody except for Miriam and Douglas and Gates have 12 hours per classroom. And the reason that those other schools have more is because their PTOs fund additional assistance. So think about, Evelyn, for a second, what 12 hours during a week looks like in a classroom that includes lunch and recess. So I know that Miriam parents feel very differently about this, and I know that Miriam teachers feel very differently about this because Miriam parents and teachers have had a completely different experience than some of the other schools have. So I just want people to keep that in mind as we bring this discussion forward, because Ginny, I know that was your experience at Miriam. I know it was Diane's experience at Miriam, but those of us who went to Blanchard or some of the other schools, that isn't the same experience. And so I just want to be careful when we're talking about it, that this isn't like a shared experience across all the schools in terms of the roles of the assistants and the things that they have played. Okay. Do other people, Adam?
I have 3 questions, but I know, Tessa, you asked us to keep it to 1. If we have time, we'll come back to me. But my biggest question is sort of echoing what Ginny mentioned, which is where, sorry, I want to go back first, and I want to thank the administration team for doing something that I had asked a number of times, which was to put out a long-term plan that really shows how we're going to take this federal money and this extra money that we know is coming to the district, and showing us over time what the plan would be and how it would be used, and giving them the ability to make the proposal to us for the best use of those funds. So that being said, my question is, we're looking at about $510,000 over the next 2 years, I think I saw, in federal money. Why this versus all-day K or any other strategic priority that we have? But I think all-day K because we've agonized over that around this table before.
That's a great question, and this will speak to that. I think, if we implement all-day K, we will, impact 400 students each year. If we implement this system, we'll impact, 2,500 students each year. And so when I think about coming out of the pandemic, it's our current students that have experienced this disruption to education, but our incoming kindergartners have not. And so when I think about how do we want to use federal stimulus money, we have to set priorities. And I think the pandemic has caused us to rethink the order of some of those priorities. And I actually think having a system of support in the schools is going to have a much broader impact on students long-term than just the all-day K program. I think that still needs to be a long-term priority for us, and we should continue to chip away at that every year. But I think in terms of if we were going to move something forward, this will have the broader impact that we need.
Dave?
No value judgments on what it's being spent on, but if it's spent on eliminating all-day K tuition, you'll also buy 1 year. That cost would then be in the budget base. The proposal that's being made now, because it gradually steps down the funding of assistance and then eliminates the position, doesn't have the phrase funding cliff.
Amy's had her hand up for a little while, and then I'll call on you. Amy?
Thanks. I feel really strongly that we are at this pivotal point in education, that we know that for a long time there are things that needed to be implemented that we haven't done, just simply because of it's just much easier to just go with the status quo than to try to introduce something new. And I really appreciate the administration coming in and introducing something that I think is really important, and is going to have an impact on a wide range of students. So I have to say, I really support this. I think that having professionals, having people that are trained and skilled in these areas in order to reach out to students on all levels, I just think that that's money better spent.
John?
I'll make one comment that I always make so Peter isn't disappointed, and that is that I'm never impressed by the argument that says everybody else is doing this, so of course we should do it. So we'll get that out of the way. The other thing that I would say, in terms of comment, is that I'm sure there are many districts with which you would like to change budgets per student. But if you were going to do that, would you also accept the achievements of their students? And I think the answer is, well, that wouldn't be so much fun, because we're actually pretty happy with the achievement of our students. And, you know, one of the great accomplishments of the school district has been that we have, in fact, continuously done more with less. And the unfortunate news is that your remit going forward, of course, is to continue to do that, because the math isn't changing. Having said that, I think one of the things that would be very helpful to me in terms of understanding the implementation of this is to understand the student contact and flexibility associated with each of the definitions. So my assumption, having listened to this, is that a coach works with teachers. And, you know, looking at things like reading specialist, I'm assuming a reading specialist works with students, you know, but I don't know exactly how flexibly. So, you know, if I could see this more in the context of, you know, student contact and how much student contact is being generated from these different kinds of things, then I think that would help me feel, you know, more understanding about what the impact might be. And then the last, you know, comment that I would make is that, you know, obviously we need to have objectives, and I appreciate the effort, you know, to put out some specific goals, you know, with the information and limitations of the information we have today. When we strip that away, the question that every parent will always have, that I have always had, is, you know, what is the potential of my children, and how can I best help them achieve that potential? That has nothing to do with the third grade state benchmark. That has something to do with each individual. So until the school system finds some way, you know, to try and calibrate for where each individual student might want to go and might be capable of going, there's going to be some, you know, dead weight that's associated with, here's the bar, that's where we're going.
Okay, so I feel really strongly about this in case anyone was confused or unsure. But as an educator and as someone who spends quite a bit of time helping remediate students who aren't getting what they need in Tier 1 supports, it is completely and totally horrifying to me that we received these recommendations back in 2017. I believe that was right before I joined school committee. And these recommendations lay out a clear path of what we needed to do to reach the vast majority of students that had disproportionate outcomes based on what we were doing. And the fact that we've now started to do a better job of data collection, and we still haven't moved the needle despite making some fairly significant changes to our literacy program, to our math program, and to adding things to the tiered support system that was introduced back in 2017. We haven't moved the needle because we're not doing the right thing. And as a parent of students who have not always gotten the Tier 1 supports that they need, the idea that we would be putting in coaches and specialists that would be providing targeted interventions or would be providing teachers with the ability to better implement targeted interventions is so much better than just having an uncertified staff. I understand, because I was a teacher, what it is like to be in a classroom with 24 or 25 kids, but there is lots of professional development out there. There are lots of things that you can do to best support kids in your class with differentiated instruction. And these supports of adding coaches and adding specialists who have special training in how to implement this differentiated instruction and how to best reach students at all levels is good for our students who are struggling with foundational skills, and good for our students who need to reach and who are ready to go beyond what's being taught in the classroom. And I think that laying out the plan in this way and shifting our resources from uncertified staff to certified staff, I understand the number of hours that there may be contact with students is concerning to some, but from someone whose kids went to a school where there was less assistant support before we regionalized, and then the same as others, but having a PTO that never fundraised for that, that was not something that was missing in their education. And so I am fully in support of this. I think it is really exciting. I like the way that it's laid out. I like that there's a plan. And I do think that the only thing that would provide little bit more information is just a better understanding of what some of those actual roles are and how they would implement. But the presentation was already really long, so that's okay for another day. Okay, I'll stop talking. Diane?
I'm sorry I missed the beginning. We've been talking about this, I'm sure, before I got here, but since 2016. So the Massachusetts a tiered system of support. It is proactive, it is data-driven, it is intentionally collaborative. You have a lot of eyes on students for a prolonged period of time. It's personal, it allows for personalized learning. I don't know if the quantity of contact hours, John, to your point, how much student contact will be generated versus like the quality and efficacy of the interactions themselves. And student achievement is our job. I mean, it's the social, emotional, and academic, well-being of our students and the rigor and efficacy of our programs. That's our job is to ensure that. And look, special education, this is not a special education thing, but it affects special education for sure, because more kids can stay in the classroom. That's where they should be, in the regular education classroom. But this directive has been embedded, it's not as a requirement, but as a guidance in IDEA, in the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, since 2004. So we are like kind of late jumping on the bandwagon with this, and the result is that we haven't been able to be as proactive, I think, as we want to be, because we haven't had the infrastructure fixed into our elementary schools that allow for this kind of data-driven process to happen. And I think it's wonderful that it's happening now, even though we're coming out of a pandemic. And I'm glad that I'm still sitting around this table and can see that it's going to move forward, and hopefully it will, and with full support. In terms of the classroom assistants, look, my kids went to Merriam. I think in a perfect world, we would have everything we wanted, because those assistants build classroom culture, and they're beloved, and they make a huge impact on the culture of the classroom. I think that the idea of classroom assistants at all levels is incompatible with MTSS. I think I suppose I should pose this as a question, but I wonder how much it impacts teachers' ability to really see what's going on in the classroom, because there's this other person that's kind of helping them out, dealing with these things, behaviors that come up, or helping if a child is struggling. And teachers are trained, they're highly trained to look at student behavior and look at student skill acquisition and understand it based on the principles that they've been taught in their programs, and then to find and develop ways to remediate and help those students. So that process, I can't believe it wouldn't get impeded a bit with the presence of classroom assistants. Again, I'm a Merriam parent, and I think that if we had all the money in the world, we'd do all day K, and we'd do assistants, and we'd do this too. It's all great, but it's, you have to make hard choices, and if you're gonna have to make a hard choice, make this one.
Kira?
Thank you. I'm so grateful for this presentation. I know that there's a lot. I think that for me, I'm missing a couple of key points. And I'm a McCarthytown mom, so we have assistants, and the times that I've walked into classrooms for my two boys and I've met assistants, the big thing that I've appreciated is that often they were women of color, women who speak a different language than I do, women who are contributing to the culture of the classroom, women who are contributing to the culture of the school. And I think that it's really interesting that this MTSS documentation and that video that we saw, representation was in the language, and I do not see that here. And that that concerns me. I would love to hear about how that recruitment process is going to go, whether or not these are going to be internal hires, or if they are going to be external, and what that means for how we're going to infuse diversity in this level that's already here, but that has effects up and down in our infrastructure. I think that communication is something that I'm also missing here. That X to Y trail that you show us on slide 26, there's a lot of internal communication, and I would love to hear more about where parents fit in the pings in that 8 to 10 week cycle. And the final thing that I will say about teacher assistants in those later grades, I think that thinking about a 5th or 6th grader as a middle schooler, I think is an interesting thing. And the first thing that popped out to me was thinking about executive function and that big transition to middle school, and how that organization piece and that way that we think about, I need to go here, so I need to do this, and then this, and then this, and this, and this, and how having that extra person in the classroom is so helpful for those things. I think that Diane is right about, having another person means that our highly trained teachers may not catch all of the things because they're concentrating on so much more. And yet we know that students in that major transition are working on so much more. And so I want my cake and I want to eat it too. So I would say I love that there are literacy coaches in here, and I love that there's STEAM in here. But I would love to hear about, it's not soft skills, but those other skills, those key skills like executive function that are so huge for your success in middle school and high school. And is there a specialist for that? How can they fit into this? I just feel like there's so much missing for me. It's not that I don't support it. I just want just a touch more. Please and thank you.
Sure, we could talk, maybe just a couple comments on that. I think in terms of diversity of the workforce, I appreciate that. I think one of the things we looked at with our assistant workforce is, Marie pulled some data on this as we were looking at this. On average, we turn over about 20% of that workforce in a given year. It actually is a range. There's no such thing as average, John. But the range is typically between 10 and 30% on a given year. And so, one thing it also gives us an opportunity is that we don't envision large-scale reductions in force to be able to do this. It really has an opportunity to be an attrition-based model over a period of time. But that same diversity of the workforce is turning over every year anyway. So, you're not going to change the diversity of that paraprofessional workforce or the classroom assistant workforce, because we're hiring every year within that same workforce now. So I think we would continue to see a fairly representative, stable, representation among our paras. In terms of looking at the recruitment process, there might likely be some internal candidates and people within the district who are thinking of applying for this. But I think in any good program rollout, and when you're hiring leadership, you're thinking of some kind of combination of internal and external. I think one thing that we've learned about over the course of this year are some of the schools of education that have training programs for leadership positions and teacher leadership positions, being able to reach directly out to them and do some recruitment efforts in order to recruit a more diverse workforce. I don't know if, Deb, you want to talk to that? You look like you do.
I think what I just wanted to add was that our last 2 hires that were on one of the slides, actually 2 previous hires, both were women of color. So our coordinator and one of our coaches were brought into the district from out of state and out of district to be more representative. So we have an opportunity to do that even in the hiring process. Yeah.
Evelyn?
So I have a question. How is this being communicated to district staff, and particularly the folks that this change is going to affect?
Sure. So we sent something out district-wide to staff on Monday to let them know about the proposed change and that we'd be discussing it publicly at this meeting. We also worked with our building leaders to develop a communication plan, and then between Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning, they actually met with the people who would be, impacted the most by this. So principals had meetings with teachers, they had meetings with assistants over the couple of days to talk through the proposed plan and make sure that people knew what we were proposing. We certainly are receiving comments and feedback from teachers along the way as well. And then we sent it out to families today to make sure that families knew this was a topic of discussion tonight, and people could tune in and watch.
Yeben?
Just a few questions on comments. So I echo actually Jeannie's comments. So we have an assistant sitting in the class and provide a service to 20 students. That's very accessible to the student. And right now we have Debbie mentioned, math coach, right? Cover 2 schools.
We would have in this proposal, we would have a math specialist who would travel to 2 schools like our special ed coordinators and actually like our STEAM coaches do now, travel between 2 schools. So right now you also present some data like 50% of the students in the math actually is below 1 grade, right? So that's basically, I assume, that's a math specialist supposed to address, right? That's 50% of the students. So it again depends on, so we need to look at some other data points, but the idea would be that the math specialist would be able to work with small groups of students, sometimes in the classroom. It really depends on what that Tier 2 instruction looks like. Tier 2 instruction can take place in the classroom. It can be the classroom teacher providing that second dose of instruction, that small group instruction. It could be a specialist that provides that. So it really depends on the nature and what's needed.
Yeah, anyway, so that's what I just a little bit concerned about. This is just accessibility to the students, right, who really need the help. So I asked my kids who attended actually high school. So I asked him, do you know your counselor? He said, no. Yes, he knows, but have you ever talked to her? No, never. So that kind of, I don't really want that happen to this situation, right? So I would say that's one comment. So, but I always like say change it for better. Like let's try new things and see what the outcome will be. That's I see this as MTS is a good thing actually. So given we have enough budget, right? So second is Marie paint a picture like this MTSS and versus assistant kind of sounds like a zero-sum game, but in my view, probably it's not, right? That's just based on the budget point of view. Even so, from the Marie's slide, actually, the one purpose for this MTSS is actually to strengthen the GE, right? General education, such that one of the superintendent in the outcome, expected outcome is a number of referral to the SE is going to be reduced. So I would say that's going to be reduce the budget or expenses in the SE, right? Do we expect that happen? So then,
yeah, I think, I want to be cautious about that. The goal of MTSS isn't just to reduce, the total number of special education referrals. One thing we do want to do is reduce the disproportionality of special education referrals, but it also makes sure that when we do refer students to special education, it's an appropriate referral. And I think right now we probably are referring too many students who may not need to be referred to special education simply because it's the only support system that there is for needs. So for example, we looked at some of the EL data, we looked at some of the, data, particularly like low socioeconomic status was another area of overrepresentation. If we don't have the general education supports and special education is perceived as the only support system of the district that people can get these supports and services, you're probably going to have over-identification there. It's not an intentional outcome to reduce special education referrals, but is it possible? Yes.
Yeah, I would say that's probably can also offer some funding to the assistant,
Sure.
right? I mean,
I think the other thing with that is that over time, if our school psychologists are not spending all of their time doing testing, then they're able to actually serve as really highly effective folks who understand data, who understand social emotional learning, and who can be amazing supports for the general ed teachers too.
One last one, quick. Sorry. So here we have say the slides. It looks great. Presentation. It's has the outcomes, expected outcomes. So why is what's missing actually is what is the exit strategy? So by practicing this, implementing this thing for 3 years or 2 years, then the outcome turns out not great or whatever, then are we going to stop it or something? What is exit criteria?
Yeah, I think if we are looking at our data 5 years from now and we have not seen the change that we anticipate seeing, you know, in terms of how we're helping move students forward in their own growth and how we're impacting disproportionality and some of the other data points that we suggested we'd like to look at, yeah, I think we would look at a different strategy. Can I tell you today X, Y, or Z, you know, is how we're going to know that it's time to move on? No, I don't have that. You know, I wish education were as clearly defined as that. At least we're not there as a district, but I appreciate the question. I don't have that good answer for you, though.
Adam, and then Diane.
Yeah, I actually have a response to something that John said with regards to the budget and our ability to have great outcomes with our current budget. And I want to challenge you on that because I think we have great outcomes for those who are able to access the content. And what we found through the reporting of the disproportionality is that there's a larger group of people who aren't able to access the material that we're providing to them in the way we've been providing it to them today. So short of having more money to be able to put this in place, we have to reallocate funds. But I think it's unfair to say that we do a great job of having great outcomes with the system that we provide today, with the budget we provide today.
All right, John, I have to let you respond.
Thank you. I actually agree with what Adam said. I just want to be clear that, you know, if you look at our outcomes in total, they're good, but there are some students that we clearly are failing. And so I'm not saying that there aren't important things for us to do better. I'm just saying you can beat yourself up, but you also have to have some appreciation for what you're doing right. So there's some important things to fix, but we're doing some stuff right.
Diane.
So I'm hearing a lot of people worrying about another layer of kind of on the administrative level. And so I just want to ask, why can't like a reading specialist do the coaching job? You know, like can you speak to that? I just want to be able to kind of get clear in my mind what the rationale is for that. And if you're still kind of sorting out the job descriptions, that's fine, but I'm asking the question.
So a few years ago, we came to the school committee and shared, I believe it was Atul Gawande's video about how everybody needs a coach and how everybody can get better at what they do. And oftentimes it's compared to sports. They make the sports analogy that even the top sports athletes have coaches and trainers to help them get even better at their craft. And so what we decided to do was to focus on what we call student-centered coaching, which was really where a coach becomes a partner with a teacher, or teacher teams. And in this case, it would be an MTSS team, so they would be part of that team and work with the leadership team at the school also to set school goals, teacher grade level goals, and then of course specific student goals. But they would be a partner in thinking about, when we talk about some of our culturally responsive and inclusive practices that we're trying to bring in and help teachers utilize those in the classroom. Planning, assessment, and instruction, utilizing some of the UDL framework that we've now shared with teachers, but again, we need more time implementing what it means to use UDL. We have brand new math program. We have new structured literacy, different components that we really want to make sure get rooted into our classroom practices. Thinking for teachers how to create appropriate learning targets for students and what that entails. They can be incredibly helpful collecting and analyzing various evidence of student learning, not just assessments and numbers and numerical data and quantitative data, but all that other qualitative data that happens in the classroom and looking at student work over time and what that means for instruction. They can go into a classroom and co-teach and debrief a lesson with a teacher and to be another set of eyes in the classroom. And they can also to help then provide professional learning and build knowledge and content and pedagogy with teachers. So there's a lot of work that they can do, but it's really about being a lifelong learner and having the mindset that we can all get better at what we do.
So one of the things that I was struck with when I arrived 5.5 years ago, I think I made some assumptions, and I made the assumption that the district would have had a pretty hardy MTSS system in place because it's not a new thing. It's not a program, and I think that's really important to say. It's not a program. It is really a system of supports, and I came from a place where we, since 2004, when IDEA was reauthorized and spoke to the need for districts to develop a really intensive, they used to call it response to intervention, which didn't actually have the social emotional pieces of it. Since then, that's been put in place, and that's why it's now changed to talk about, that's why it's now called MTSS. And most districts have been doing this for a lot of years. This is not new science. This is not new pedagogy, and there is just an unbelievable amount of research to support it. When we think about coaches, I always think about students as general education students first, always. They don't come to us as anything but a general education student when they register, when their parents first get into that gateway, whether it's for kindergarten registration or they're moving here at another grade. Our kids come to us as general education students, and that's what every single one of them is. Some of them need other supports. Some of them need special education. Some of them need and require English language services. And so, but in a system, our general education teachers are the most important linchpin of that system. And for them to know and be able to work collaboratively with experts so that our kids who spend the most amount of time in general education, when you look at our inclusion data and the amount of time that our kids spend in gen ed, we have very high percentages of kids who do that. And so the onus on us as a system to develop our general educators to be able to work with our students, knowing how much our population has shifted, knowing how many newcomers we have coming to us from countries and places all over the world. It is critically important. We also know from just a research perspective that when we're talking about coaching as a job-embedded professional learning structure, we have 98% carryover of skills. So any of the things that Deb mentioned and a whole host of other ways that coaches can support general educators end up then applying to, oh, you know what, I tried that with that kid, I'm going to try that with this kid. And so it's building efficacy along the way. Sit and get professional learning, which we do a lot of, 2% carryover in terms of all of the things that our teachers sit through. The reality is when they go back to their classroom, it's really hard to change practice. It's really hard when you've got all those kids in front of you. And so having that coach there, okay, what's the data say? What are we changing? How are we going to do this? Let's model, let's co-teach, let's do all these things. It has the capacity, it has the ability to really, really shift. And I want our general education teachers to know and understand everything that's happening for their kids. So when they do require special ed and they go down the hall, I want them to know what that special education teacher is doing. I want them to understand what those goals and objectives are so that everybody on that team is working together for that student for any of those tiers of instruction. And the same go for our English language educators. So as you can tell, I'm a little passionate about this, but like I said, I just continue to really struggle with the fact that we're not changing our data, and we have a lot of research to really support the direction in which we're going. And I understand there are huge cultural and climate shifts that we're asking our educators to make, and we're committed to working closely with them. We have an amazing set of staff, and they're only going to continue to get better. So I'm looking forward to the work.
Thanks, Dawn. I wanted to stand up and applaud you. That was beautiful. Jenny, did you have something?
Just very briefly, with respect to the people we've already hired, I have not spoken to a single teacher who has ever mentioned feeling supported by a coach. So I guess maybe I have a lack of understanding of what these folks do, but it sounds like, you know, a whole lot more middle management, and you know, everybody might need a coach, but everybody needs an assistant too. So, you know, I hope that this is really going to be a game changer for the teachers, you know, because I have not heard that ever.
Okay. All right, so I just want people to be aware of the time. It's 10 past 9. We were already supposed to be through the next item on the agenda, and we have a whole bunch of people in the audience that want to speak. So Adam, do you want to do that?
Sure. If you're in the audience and you do want to speak, please be sure to raise your hand, and I will unmute and call on you. And I will say their name, and then if I've got your name wrong, please correct me for it. And Tessa, are we going to do 3 minutes each? Okay. Laura, you are, there you go. Go ahead and unmute and you're able to talk.
Yes, hello, thank you, and good evening. My name is Laura Schmidt. I am a parent and a teacher in the district. I am an EL teacher in the district, and I have a whole thing written, so I'm just going to read it. Reading this proposal brought about a deep feeling of deflation and frustration. As an EL teacher, a big concern for the EL department is that we have asked for years for more staffing, and we continuously do not receive the support, and are told there is no money in the budget. For example, according to the proposal, 25% of our student population is ELs that have IEPs. They're the most underserved population in our district. Our ELs only receive about 50% of the recommended service hours a day. EL students at a language proficiency of a 1 or 2 are recommended by DESE to receive 90 minutes a day of service instruction. In our schools, most only receive 30 to 40 minutes a day because we do not have the staff to allow more service time. To put this into perspective, in 4 of the AB elementary schools, there is only 1 EL teacher, and the student to teacher ratio is an average of 32 to 1. This one teacher has to plan for and teach 7 grade levels, create curriculum across those 7 grade levels for each content area. Plus, this teacher is encouraged to collaborate and co-teach with grade level teachers when they push in for services. This is impossible since we do not have common time to meet with 7 grade levels to plan. More often than not, when we push in for services, we are flying blind because we do not know what is being taught. The reason for the feelings of frustration and deflation are that within this proposal, there is not even an EL educator represented in the proposed coaches or the leadership teams. Also, we have been told there is no money in the budget for hiring more staff. But yet, here we have 9 new positions being proposed. How is that equitable? How can we reach our most vulnerable community when there is no one there to advocate for them? Coaches, though valuable, don't win ball games. Players that invest in the daily work do. We need more players in the game. We need more staff for our most vulnerable students. I thank the school committee for hearing my concerns and ask that you really think about what the students need before going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right, Steve, you can unmute and talk.
Hi, Steve Ballard from Boxborough. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't know where to start. There's so much here. I just wanted to echo my belief that the things that Jenny said and Yebin and Kira, I agree with almost all of those things. This is about people, the adults, and it really should be about the people in the classroom. I mean, I've been a teacher before too, and I've had EFL experience abroad. I've had music teaching experience, but who are we hiring? And how many relative to the students? That's what's so important. You talked about the classroom size and all of that. Well, if you hire these 9 people at 80,000 each plus Benny's for 830,000 or so, as it was already stated, you could hire at 60,000. You could hire new teachers, and you could thus deal with this issue of getting more people of color into the classrooms at 60,000 plus 13 teachers. Now, if you took the 110 classrooms in the elementary school level and you added 13 teachers to those, then you would reduce the class size from 22 to 20. That's 2 kids out of the classroom. All right, that's one thing. That's one better way to spend this money, is to hire 13 teachers. Maybe you could hire an EL teacher out of those, and you still have 9 or 10. Okay, and when Tessa says, well, these assistants, another good way is to keep assistants that we have that are really experienced, that we pay half as much as a teacher, but we're teachers. I've seen, I don't have a kid in the upper grades, but at Blanchard, my child was in 2nd grade, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, every single year, the assistant in the class was amazing. And we got incredible value out of a teacher who was retired one time, a para that was really, really experienced in another year. And this year, a teacher who's gotten great experience and credentials and just happens to not need to be a full-time teacher. So that's the value. But we have, if you hire 9 people that we don't know for a SPED director who's going to come in every year, a new one, the problems that you're talking about with the disproportionality and the bad evaluation and placement in SPED, those things don't go away by hiring 9 new people at a high rate to come in and spend 2 hours per class. This is what it does. So the 12 hours that you got for the assistant, guess what you get for those 9 specialists? You get 1.5 per school of the 6 schools out of the 9. So you get 2.5 hours. I did the math. 2.5 hours of that specialist time, whether it's a STEAM or the literacy coach or the math specialist. You get 2.5 hours combined for each one of those classes. So, not even an hour for each one of these coaches to help these individual teachers.
Thank you. Catherine, you can unmute and speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, and I apologize for reading at the wrong time earlier. My name is Kate Schiebler, and I've been an upper elementary teacher at Merriam for over a decade, and I'm incredibly concerned by the decision to remove classroom assistants. While I also believe that assistants better support the stated academic goals of student growth than the intended new hires, I'll use this brief time to focus on student social emotional needs. An additional known trusted adult in the classroom has an immensely positive impact on students' mental health, even if it's only 12 hours a week and not 18. If a student is in crisis, having another adult available allows that student to have immediate one-on-one guidance. As wonderful as our counseling staff is, they support hundreds of students and aren't always available at a moment's notice. Classroom assistants can act as a team with classroom teachers to ensure all students' emotional needs are met promptly by an adult who deeply knows them. Without classroom assistants, how are you planning to fill this gap? Your plan overemphasizes the academic needs of students, but we know that they cannot succeed academically if their mental and emotional needs are not met. It's extremely concerning to me that at a time when students' mental health may be at the lowest point it has ever been due to the pandemic, in a district that has always struggled with this issue, we are prioritizing curriculum coaches over the mental health of our students. No amount of coaching will change the fact that I am only one person trying to support 24 students on my own the vast majority of the day. I urge you to reconsider this decision for the sake of our 9 to 12-year-old mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Tasha, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Adam. I just had a quick question for you, and then I have another follow-up question. Are you going to read the letters that were submitted earlier today?
I do have some letters that were submitted before the cutoff of noon today, and I will read them with the same 3-minute time limit that we give everybody else.
And as far as questions, if people also submitted their questions, will you read those, or is it better if people ask their questions in this matter?
Typically during public participation, we don't respond to questions from the public.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you just said.
Sorry, typically during public participation, the committee won't respond to questions to the public. It's up to the discretion of the administration if they want to respond.
Sorry, I just meant, will you read the questions that were submitted or no? Like, should people raise their hand if they...
So we got a bunch of comments that came to the public participation email. I'm not really sure what kind of questions you're referring to.
Okay, I think the person will probably just read their questions. So I'll start with mine now.
Okay.
So my name is Tasha Wigmore, and I'm a 5-6 teacher at Merriam. I have a concern about the ability of coaches to support the actual work being done in the classroom in the same way that assistants can. How consistently will a coach be able to be in the classroom supporting students? Right now, a classroom teacher can utilize their assistant to help support differentiation in all subject areas. This differentiation allows a classroom teacher to work closely with students whose needs you've mentioned in your proposal. A teacher knows their assistant will be there daily for math, so they can create math groups in order to support the individual needs of their students. This is the same for reading instruction, included guiding reading groups, book clubs, conferring, and other instructional models. Why can't we take a closer look at how we are utilizing assistants across the district and go from there? Thank you.
Okay, Martha, you can go ahead and unmute.
Okay, hi. My name's Martha Bethel. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Douglas. This is my 19th year in the district. I felt really moved to speak about this today because it's such an important issue and a huge change to our school. Students and staff have been put through the ringer this year, academically, emotionally, and we've all met and exceeded the expectations that have been put forth in front of us, regardless of the huge toll it's taken on our wellness. Now we're learning about these new initiatives to be implemented in the fall. We've got MTSS. The teachers still have to learn, train, and implement the new math program. And this alone is it's a huge undertaking. When it comes to the coaching issue, realistically, the return on investment for having 9 new coaches, the return on investment is rather low because realistically, this comes down to one coach to cover 42 classrooms and over 800 students. The likelihood of a coach impacting a student directly is negligible. There's so much more to an elementary classroom than curriculum. This is what's been said before, but teachers can't teach curriculum, manage all the emotional and social interactions among the students, teach small groups with targeted instruction while implementing 3 new programs, collecting data all by themselves for 24 students. But classroom assistants help with us. They know the students, they know the culture in the classroom, they can keep the class rolling so that the teachers can work in small groups with targeted instruction for specific students. Classroom assistants are in the classroom on a daily basis, and we work alongside each other to meet the needs of the students. This is the time that we should be looking to increase the classroom assistant support time, not phase it out. I think that MTSS it seems like a great program, but it's a rushed implementation. I think let's learn about it next and get trained in it in this upcoming academic year and then implement it the following year. That's not an unreasonable request. I would never hold my students accountable for a skill that they have never been taught. That's not educationally sound, nor how learning should be approached. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Carol, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, my name is Carol Leandro.
I am a classroom assistant. This year, I am the 6th grade math assistant at the RLP, but for the 13 years prior, I have been a 5-6 assistant for
Carol, we can't hear you anymore.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Miriam does no longer have 18-hour-a-week assistants. They were also limited to 12 hours a week. So that, just to clarify that, everybody is the same this year. I just want to, first of all, applaud the administration for bringing forth the idea of MTSS. I think the overall idea of implementing a plan like this, a system like this, is outstanding. What I'm concerned about is the process of the implementation of the plan and how it's going to ultimately be implemented. I just want to clarify the scope, which is that what you are doing in exchange for hiring 9 coaches or specialists, you are giving up on the order of 54 to 60 teaching assistants. That is a huge loss of direct service support in classrooms. The other thing that I'm very concerned about that was not addressed at all in this plan is how you're going to make up for the other hidden costs of losing all those assistants. Who is going to cover all the lunch and recesses? Who is going to cover all the teachers who need to go to various collaborative meetings for IEPs and MTSS? Who is going to cover the gap for the EL students? Because right now it is the classroom assistants who do that. Who is going to sub for teachers? You already have a problem finding subs. When you have a classroom assistant, they are able to step right in. They know the classroom routine, they know the curriculum, they know the students. Who's going to cover all of that when you eliminate the classroom assistants? Finally, the other thing that you're eliminating the classroom assistants for grades 4 through 6. Everyone knows that there's a notable leap in the cognitive expectations, the performance expectations, and the complexity of the curriculum for grades 4 through 6. And teachers cannot implement all of that alone. The other thing is that assistants do not obscure what is going on for students from teachers. If anything, they are another set of eyes and ears. They can inform teachers. They notice things. Teachers cannot be watching all 24 students all at once. An assistant can keep them informed of things. The assistant is present in unstructured, difficult times. They can inform the teachers of social, emotional, and behavioral things that are going on there. I think if you really want to bolster your general education, which is the important part of the snowman,
Time is up.
you need to make sure that you are truly providing the support within the classroom, not only for to help the teacher, but for the benefit of all general education students. And you can do better.
Okay, and the last public comment hand that we have up is Leah. Go ahead, Leah, and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just have 2 quick things. I just wanted to say, I think that what's missing, or one of the things missing in this proposal, is teacher input and voice. And that is so important. We are with students every day. Our perspective really should be included and matters. A couple of things that I think would be helpful is if administration talks to teachers about how iReady actually went. I know first graders, oh, sorry, I forgot to say I've been teaching for 22 years in the district, and this year teaching first grade in RLP. First graders, other teachers have told me that kids in their classes as well, in some cases labored for hours on this assessment, and it did not feel at all developmentally appropriate for younger students. So before moving ahead with plans with iReady, I think it would be important to gather that information from teachers. And I would say the same about the new math program. Teachers have not been surveyed, haven't been asked what they think about the new math program and whether or not it's meeting the needs of our younger elementary students. So I would appreciate it if we had some input in these decisions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. This will be the last one. This is Susan. You can go ahead and unmute.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Susan Giulietti, and I come to this discussion first as a parent and second as a pediatric ICU healthcare provider. During this last year, I've seen the COVID pandemic firsthand, but more importantly, I've seen the pandemic of mental health. This is not a topic that AB is immune to. We all know that. But this pandemic of mental health, for lack of a better word, is unprecedented and pervasive. Access to mental health services is abysmal, and the waiting period for access to care is lengthy. While I recognize that AB is not going to remediate our broken healthcare system, we can take a stand to advocate for our students. I've listened to the presentation and I recognize that this shift is a great idea and it may be inevitable for good outcomes for our students. I see it as a value add for AB. However, I am asking the committee to consider deferring the shift, as many others have asked, until at least 2022 to 2023, as we have time to really enumerate the downstream effects, list the drivers that we have discussed, and really understand the true social emotional needs that our kids present with as they return to full in-person school. These children need to learn how to relearn, to assimilate and integrate back into the full socialization in their school systems. Many of them are very hesitant to come back to school for a variety of reasons. This is not the time to take away support for our teachers and staff, and most importantly for our students. The tremendous grit and resilience of our students and teachers spans the district. It is not isolated to one individual school committee or community or any other specific area. We are AB, we are in this together, and if we truly believe that this is an underpinning of our AB community, we need not to rush into this. We need to take the steps together. Our AB teachers, staff, faculty, and assistants are extraordinary, and they've been through the ringer. These teachers and students deserve to maintain at least the 12-hour classroom assistance for grades 1 through 6 while we return to in-person learning in the fall. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Susan. Tessa, I have a couple emails that were sent in to the public comment email address. If you wouldn't mind timing me, I will do my best to read these, but know that I'm reading them sight unseen and they're not my words, so I may fumble a bit.
I shall time you.
Thank you. Okay, the first email we have came from Heather Wilson, who is a grade 1 teacher at McCarthy Town. Dear School Committee and Superintendent Light, I'm taking you up on your request for feedback on the presentation to the school committee about future changes in the elementary schools. I became a parent at McT in 1994 and have 3 children who graduated from AB. I began teaching first grade at McT in 2005. I've seen many changes over the years at McT and throughout the district, most of which have been great. I'm retiring this year, and maybe that's why I feel comfortable speaking up about some of the aspects of the MTSS proposal. I speak only for myself, but my views may represent thoughts that others share. The goal of the new proposal, to meet the varied needs of all of our students, especially after the year we've had, is an incredibly important one and one that I support. My initial thought after reading the proposal was, given that this is such a sweeping proposal, I wonder if any elementary teachers were part of the decision-making process that developed this plan. There may have been elementary teachers involved, but I don't know of any. You reference the implementation of iReady as a tool that provides important data to guide our instruction. Teachers learned about iReady at the start of our hybrid year. We had one training session which was recorded for another group of teachers somewhere else. There was no opportunity for questions. We had no preview of the program. We did not know that the program automatically inserted game-like breaks for students as they progressed through the questions. We were not allowed to assist in any way, but I saw many students just pushing any button to get them to the next game break. This may have impacted our data. No one has ever asked me how this assessment went for the students or if it was useful for my instruction. I want to comment on the elimination of classroom assistants. In the 1990s, when my children began at McT, there was a staff that was hired specifically to cover lunch and recess. What emerged was that there were many social and emotional issues that occurred on the playground and in the cafeteria that spilled over to the classroom. Over time, assistants were hired who worked in classrooms with students and developed relationships with those students. When they also covered lunch and recess, they were much better equipped to manage and help solve the many issues that occur outside of the classroom. We need to be aware of this when we talk about phasing out assistance in grades 4, 5, and 6, knowing that social emotional learning is so important in our district. You propose hiring more coaches. My frustration as a classroom teacher is that coaches do not work with children. Teachers need real support, helping them meet the needs of struggling students. They need people in the classroom working with students. You said you welcome feedback, but the timing of that request seems late since you're presenting to the school committee and appear to have a plan in place. Thank you for listening. Heather Wilson. Ooh, I had 30 seconds left on that one. Okay. Nah, I'm good. Next one is a message that came in from Vanessa Mann. Dear Peter Light and school committee members, after reading the slides that you plan to share at the school committee meeting tonight, I have some deep concerns that I would like to share. I agree with the specific goal of our students will have equitable opportunities and tools to learn. However, I am disheartened that I am just understanding the method that is being implemented just days before it will be presented at school committee. I wish there had been teacher feedback solicited sooner. I believe that funding teaching assistants in the classrooms at grade 4 through 6 is not only in alignment with the ultimate goal cited above, but supports it in ways that the strategic plan that you have described will not. I've worked at the 4 through 6 grade level throughout my career here at AB. I've always had the invaluable experience of collaborating with a teaching assistant. When Miriam was designed and approved by the school committee and the superintendent in 1993, having a teaching assistant integrated into the educational model in each classroom was at the heart of the philosophy of the school. Having teaching assistants in a school creates opportunities at a school level for collaborative work among teachers. This collaborative work gives teachers time to develop curriculum that meets UDL instructional goals. This collaborative work gives teachers opportunities to have peer observations through a triad model where teachers can improve their practice, like wait time and implicit biases, in a safe environment. This collaborative time gives teachers opportunities to look closely at student work in ways that really gets to the heart of what students need and how teachers can improve their instruction. This is a more intimate and direct way to look at data about how students are performing than standardized tests can be biased against certain populations. Having teaching assistants is also critical to supporting students on a day-to-day basis in the classroom with the work that is before them. Teachers need more hands-on deck working directly with students. When the people who are working directly with students have relational trust with the students and are considered a part of the classroom community, they are able to help students progress in their education in all aspects, including academic and social and emotional. Having the same people who know the students from the classroom and the dynamics of the student relationships, guiding students through vulnerable times of the day like lunch and recess, has always been an intentional structure at Miriam. Social emotional learning is being supported during classroom time and less structured times at lunch and recess. Project-based learning meets the goals of UDL. Students have agency over their own learning when they are engaged in PBL. They have a choice and can bring their own personal interests and identity to learning. In order to design and implement this curriculum, having teaching assistants in the classroom is critical. The learning that students are investigating is personalized, and multiple teachers allows for the opportunity to support students' learning and exploration. Teaching students in smaller groups is another critical structure that allows for differentiated learning. Teachers need assistance to help create and support a classroom that can break into productive small group learning pods. Math instruction is increasingly intricate at the older elementary grades, and with a problem-based math curriculum, breaking into smaller groups to discuss, explore, and master math in a conceptual and practical way is imperative. Classroom assistants support this work. The next email came in from Nancy Wirtz and was signed by an additional 21 people. Dear Acton-Boxborough School Committee and Superintendent Light, we are very concerned about the proposed changes to the school supports beginning next year and how these changes will impact our students. Specifically, we are speaking of the proposal to phase out regular education classroom assistants over the next 3 years, beginning next year. This proposal is surprising and disappointing, particularly at a time when the need for consistent classroom support is even more crucial. Our classroom assistants are an integral part of our classrooms, providing social, emotional, and academic support to a diverse student population. They get to know our children on a very personal level from the very first day of school and become a trusted source of support, comfort, and knowledge of everything happening in the classroom. In addition, they are often trusted substitutes for unexpected teacher absences. They are our eyes and ears in the playground and lunch times when so many important interactions and teachable moments happen. We are deeply disappointed that any cut in assistant hours at any grade level is being considered at any time. During a pandemic, when many students will be coming back to school after more than a school year of remote learning, is even more concerning. The social emotional needs of our students should be paramount, always, but never more so than now. They need trusted adults who have time to listen and watch carefully for behaviors that could impact their successful academic and emotional growth. While we, as educators, welcome the support of literacy, math, and STEAM coaches, this kind of support can simply not replace the personal connections and support that our classroom assistants give us daily in the classroom. We are hopeful that our deep concerns will be heard and that resources will be used the best way to help support our students' social, emotional, and academic needs. The next email came from Jane Archer and was signed by an additional 6 people. Dear school committee members, we have read the recommendations from Mr. Light and as current assistants within the district, we are disheartened. We are concerned about the impact of removing assistants from the classroom within a 3-year time period. Simply put, we are the teachers' eyes and ears in the classroom. Who will look after the classes when teachers are doing assessments, sub at short notice, photocopy, or take small groups outside for class instruction? We feel like we are constantly overlooked and underestimated and underutilized. We were the last to know about the potential changes to our roles. In fact, Mr. Light met with the PTOs to discuss this proposal prior to informing his own staff. This just further reinforces to us not only poor communication, but a lack of respect for district employees. We would like to remind both the school committee and the district that the assistants are not just moms, but well-qualified professional people who had careers prior to being an assistant. We have accountants, engineers, HR executives, nurses, vets, certified teachers, all working as assistants. Just because we do not have a qualification in education does not mean that we are not more than up to the job. We are probably overqualified. We would like to know the impact these new posts will actually have in the classroom. Most of us never see the current STEAM staff and never in the classroom. What support will they give your teachers on a daily basis? As we mentioned, we are most concerned that we were not informed first, but community members were. Surely it would be proper protocol to discuss this internally first rather than the reverse. And the last message I have here is from Tasha Wigmore plus 62 other signatories. Dear Peter Light and the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee, many educators in the Acton-Boxborough elementary schools are concerned about the superintendent's recent proposed changes to school-based supports for next year. Superintendent has shared that his plan is to hire 3 literacy coaching positions, 3 additional STEAM coaching positions, and 3 certified math specialist positions for the upcoming school year. These new hiring decisions would ultimately mean phasing out of regular education classroom assistants over the next 3 years. Similarly to the superintendent, we recognize the need for regular education support in our classrooms. While a coach is important, we are experiencing the need to have additional supports on a daily basis in our classrooms to meet the diverse needs of today's students. Since our priority is meeting the needs of all students, we feel there is a greater need for additional equitable classroom assistant personnel that are dedicated to individual classrooms. In recent years, the district has allocated 12 hours of classroom assistant time for each elementary classroom. Having this time with a dedicated classroom assistant has many benefits. Students benefit from classroom assistants because of their consistency in both a social, emotional, and academic sense. Having this consistency also allows teachers to make instructional decisions that benefit all students. Even with the additional hiring of coaches, it is difficult to see how they will be in classrooms as consistently as classroom assistants currently are. As dedicated and committed educators, we are concerned that staff input has not been considered or utilized when making hiring and spending decisions that strongly impact the classroom. Despite this feedback, recently in 2019, when we advocated for more special education staff to support the inclusion model, it feels as if our voices and concerns have not been taken into account. The understanding is that these new coaching positions are being proposed for next year. Though we look forward to hearing how the MTSS model will work in each school, we feel that it is time to raise our voices again and let our concerns be heard. Many of us are hopeful that when planning for personnel needs or implementing significant changes, administration will seek staff input and feedback on priorities, and we will begin to put together teams that will strongly impact all students' ability to access the curriculum and to learn. Thank you.
All right. I'm sure that we could probably continue discussing this longer, but we are way, 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 way behind schedule. So in the interest of it being almost 10 o'clock, we're going to move on. So thank you to Dawn and Deb and Peter and Marie for such a thorough presentation, and we appreciate all the work that went into that. Okay, the next item on our agenda is probably going to generate a lot of discussion too. So, Marie has a presentation for us around elementary school assistant funding from PTOs.
I just need to say I really want to do this right now. Okay, in your packet there were several charts. I hope you had some time to look at them. I'm not going to repeat them all here. I am going to go into a little bit of detail around sort of some of the history of how this has evolved over time and recommendations of the past that have kind of gotten us to where we are right now. The bottom line is you're going to hear tonight that PTO funding for classroom assistants, we did not have any this year due to COVID and fundraising restrictions and other reasons. And we're going to recommend that we continue to not have PTOs donate money for classroom assistants. And the PTO chairs meet regularly with some members of the school committee. They've been discussing it all year, and the vast majority of them are recommending that we move forward with this. So just not to get into a lot of history, but basically PTO's funding classroom assistants started in the early 90s at a time when there were pretty significant budget cuts, specifically to art, music, and PE. And at that time, some parents got together and tried to fill that gap. And by the mid-90s, PTOs began donating funds for part-time classroom assistants when class sizes were quite large. In those days, the elementary classrooms were in the 26 to 29 range, and assistants were hired specifically to try to offset those large class sizes. It's important to know, you've heard a lot of this tonight, but in the mid-90s or 1993, I think, when Merriam was reestablished as a school, it was founded with a charter making a commitment to classroom assistants through PTO funding. And that has lasted until today. My understanding is that the Merriam PTO has been working on changing the charter over the last year. There have been, as this evolved through the 90s, inequities started to happen across schools. Some schools had more staff than other schools. And it almost from the beginning was a concern. And so in the late 90s, the superintendent at the time, Dr. Isa Zimmerman, formed an equity committee to try to find ways to sort of resolve the differences in equity across funding across schools. There was an education foundation that was founded, EdFab, that was district-wide, whose intent was to try to equalize funding across schools. There were district-wide fundraisers that were tried. A lot of things were tried over time. The 5 Acton elementary schools, this was before full regionalization, so Boxborough was a separate school district at the time. In those 5 elementary schools in Acton, PTOs donated funds for classroom assistants, but they were very different in different schools, ranging anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000 in different schools. A separate piece of this puzzle is the before and after school programs that evolved. So ComEd has run extended day for the district in one location, started in one location since the 70s. In 1994, Douglas created their own before and after school program. In 2002, Merriam created a similar program. Both of those programs had significant surpluses that were used for classroom assistance. That then became a new kind of issue. So Douglas and Merriam were able to fund a lot more staff than any of the other schools based on surpluses from before and after school programs and PTO funding donations. So by about 2009, not wanting to continue to create these separate programs, and they had different staffing, they had different salaries, they had different costs. Superintendent Bill Ryan at the time decided that all future before and after school programs would be run by community ed. They could be in the individual schools, but they'd be run by community ed. Where community ed ran extended day programs in a school, a portion of the surplus was donated back to those schools. As time went on, the before and after school funding for assistance ranged from $30,000 in one school to $210,000 in another school. And that money was all used to pay for assistance. So again, the equity around instructional supports for students was very different by school. So in 2010, Dr. Mills, who was superintendent at the time, spent about a year studying the PTO funding and before and after school funding. At that time, the recommendation from the leadership team and Dr. Mills, working with the school committee, was to increase district budget funding for assistance by $108,000 a year for 3 years, with the goal of reducing PTO funding for assistance to a point that it could be eliminated. And that happened. The district budget added $108,000 over 3 years, total of $325,000 for classroom assistance. At the same time, there was a goal to align the before and after school programs, make sure they were paying people the same amount of money. The costs were hopefully getting more similar, the rules, all of that, with a goal to eventually run them through community ed. So this is still 10 years ago, 2011. In 2016-17, Dr. Brand was the superintendent. We spent about a year at that time studying funding for assistance and before and after school funding, and with a goal of improving equity across the schools. And at that time, the recommendation, which I have coming up in another slide, but basically was to move all of the before and after school programs to community ed and offset that funding so that we were going to fund 12-hour assistance in every classroom across the district equally. And so that's kind of what brought us to where we are today. Just a note about regionalization and the impact, it's not, how the Boxborough Public Schools and Blanchard Elementary fit into this picture. So as you know, we regionalized in 2014, merging all 3 school districts. Prior to regionalization, Blanchard had a large and effective before and after school program. The Blanchard PTF charter and the Boxborough Public School policy did not allow PTF donations for staff. After regionalization, Blanchard used before and after school funds to supplement classroom assistant funding, but they've never used PTF funding for assistance. So you can see it's quite different across schools. This is the position statement from 2017. I'll give you a second to read it. So the highlight is that the current funding model represents a structural issue that the district needs to remedy. Having the sources, the outside sources, leads to inequity in staffing across schools, and it needs to be addressed. So this picture comes from the data charts that you saw in your packet. The purple line is the total funding. If you kind of ignore the last 2 years, because COVID had an impact on this, you can see it's doubled since between 2009 and 2019. from roughly 600,000 a year to almost 1.2 million per year. Maybe even higher than that, almost 1.5 million. The blue line is the district funding for assistance, and that increase has gone from 135,000 in FY09 to almost 1.2 million. That's the district funding alone. The before and after school funds had grown a lot, up to $500,000, and we've taken them totally out of the picture. And then the PTO funds have much more gradually decreased over time. And then this year we had none, and we're recommending not using any next year. So we did succeed at increasing the district portion of paying for assistance, but at the same time, we increased the number of assistants by 63%. So every step of sort of trying to remedy the equity, the solution involved adding assistants and adding money and adding assistants and adding money. The next chart, this is in your packet. I know it's got way too many numbers, but I'll just point out a few things. So again, this first column is district funding for assistance. FY09, 132,000. FY22, 1.2 million. So that's the district over time. PTOs have gone from 286 down to 186 last year. None this year. The reason there was none this year was the major fundraisers had to be canceled last spring, and with COVID and the RLP, we just across the board said we're going to go with the 12 hours in every classroom equally across all schools. And then just the way over to the right, in 2009, when we were trying to start pulling out before and after school funding and reduce reliance on PTO, we had 1,140 hours of assistance across the schools and 38 FTE. And when we got through to FY14 through FY17, 63% more. So we've gone from 38 full-time equivalent people to 60 full-time equivalent people. And this is just, I wanted to give you 1 year to show you how different it was by school and why there's a strong belief this needs to be fixed in an equitable manner. So at the high end, a school had over 500 hours of assistance, the equivalent of 17 full-time people, while another school had 250, the equivalent of 8. So there were double the amount of regular education assistants in one school as compared to another. And 3 or 4 of the schools were kind of close at the low end, and a couple of the schools were close at the high end. So where are we today? The district funds 12-hour classroom assistance in each classroom, grade 1 to 6, at the cost of $1.2 million, almost 1,500 hours, 50 FTE. PTOs donated funds through last year at the level of 186,000 last year. Again, COVID prevented fundraisers last spring, and this year, no PTO funds used for staff this year. We're recommending stop funding staff through donations, any staff. This I don't need to belabor, we've just talked about it for a long time, but I wanted to make sure that we do understand that there is a proposal to reduce district funding for 6th grade next year, 5th grade the year after, and 4th grade the year after. There is one thing I want to explain because it'll answer a few of the questions that came up. The idea is to continue with 12-hour assistance in grades 1, 2, and 3, but to hire 16-hour assistants to do it. And so they would spend 12 hours in grades 1, 2, and 3, but they would also spend 4 other hours covering lunch and recess for one of the higher grades. So if we're pulling classroom assistants out of grades 4, 5, and 6, They would still have a classroom assistant to cover lunch and recess who would get to know them over time. So the actual job for the assistant would be 16 hours, but grades 1, 2, and 3 would have 12 hours. And Peter made this point, approximately 20% of classroom assistants leave each year. We believe by phasing this out over 3 years, minimal reduction of actual people who are in positions would have to happen, that the turnover would mostly take care of it, if not totally. Why now? Capital word equity. And so we've been working towards equity. We have somewhat of a unique opportunity because we didn't use outside funding this year. It isn't like we're at a level that we have to drop down from. And that's a really important point that we want to make. If we go back for a few more years and allow more PTO funding for assistants, then we have more than 12 hours in classrooms, and we're going to have to cut that back, and it's yet another loss. The PTO chairs are increasingly expressing concerns about the responsibility to raise money to fund staff. Most PTO chairs support eliminating donations for staff. As we transition some assistant funds to MTSS, certified staff, donations could create more equity. What we don't want to do is if we make a decision to cut 6th grade assistants, then have 2 or 3 schools that have them and 2 or 3 schools that don't. So next steps, we want some community feedback, we want school committee feedback. It would involve changing your policy. So this specific sentence is in your policy that says that PTO funding shall not supply funding for certified personnel positions. We would recommend that you change that to shall not supply funding for any staff positions. And possibly you might be ready to take a school committee vote on May 20th, but we want to see kind of what you think about it as we get there. So I know it's late. I just wanted to kind of cover that. Happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Marie. So I don't know that we need to have a lengthy discussion about this tonight. What's going to happen next is that the policy subcommittee is going to start to look at the policy. This has been discussed at length with the PTO chairs over the last couple of months. This has not been like a new discussion. I would go further and say the last couple of years we've been discussing with the PTO chairs. But the purpose of this discussion, if we're going to have discussions and questions and everything, is really around equity. So if anyone has questions about this, then I'm happy to entertain them, or Marie will entertain them. But otherwise, we're not voting on anything tonight, so we can just move on if people don't have questions. All right, good. We're all like half asleep. Perfect. Okay. We're all super engaged, right? Okay. So the next item is something that should take a lot longer than it is tonight. So I am going to suggest, because it is a big thing, the slides are the same as I presented last year. I know we have new committee members. I am more than happy to sit with new committee members and talk about this, but also our workshop on May 6th is basically about the district strategy, and I think that we could easily work in some discussion around the superintendent evaluation at that time if you guys want to sort of not look at the presentation. It's already in your packet. So this really is for the school committee and not so much for the public and everything, and around understanding how we go about doing Peter's evaluation. I would say that the guidance last year from the MASC was to look at the superintendent evaluation in a slightly different light, because of course we had school closure last year. I think that the same would probably apply this year, given that it's been such a bizarre year that Peter's goals never just were different and constantly changing, and I think I'll leave it at that. So unless anyone has a burning desire to talk more about the superintendent evaluation tonight, especially those members that are new, Yeben and Kira and Evelyn, that I'm happy to meet with you and talk about it, and we will have a further discussion just before you have to do it, just not tonight.
I'm going to jump in and say yes, absolutely 100% support you, Tessa. Yes.
Okay. John?
I think the one thing that is worth going through tonight, and although we'll do it later, is the dates, just so everybody knows what the schedule is.
I can have Peter put up that one slide. It is the very first one on slide 2. Nope, the one before that.
While that goes up, I just want to add that this oftentimes for the committee feels like an onerous process, but it's not. And particularly for those who are new, a lot of the requirements and all of the things that we have to gather to write the evaluation are given to us. So Peter will give us his report, and a lot of it is just us providing an evaluation on the material that Peter gives us. So don't be concerned that this is a really onerous process. It's extremely important, but all of the material that you need to do the work is sort of given to you. So it's fairly simple to go through that and write your evaluation based on the material you're given.
Right. And so the initial is tonight. May 20th is when Peter will give an update on the status of the current year's goals. And I will issue a general public request for input. Your evaluation is not going to be due to me until June 4th. And so we will have lots of time to discuss. It's a very specific evaluation. DESE provides it. Peter fills it all in with his goals and everything like that. And as Adam pointed out, it is much, much easier. And then we won't discuss the evaluation at the public until the public meeting on June 17th. And we will discuss and vote on Peter's salary. Okay? All right. The consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda do not usually require discussion and are approved with one vote unless any member would like to hold an item for discussion in a separate vote. I will read each item name, and if any member would like it held, please say hold. Approval of meeting minutes of April 1st, 2021. Recommendation to approve $1,000 donation from the PTSO for the junior high programs. Okay, no one wanted to hold. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved with gratitude to the PTSO.
Second. All right, Adam?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yeben?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Kira?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay. Subcommittee and member reports. Adam?
I'll start with the building committee report, and I'll let Peter add anything that I may have missed. I think for those of you who've driven around the building project, there's a great deal of things that have risen out of the ground over the past few months. We've got, I think, all 3 levels of the building are up in the gymnasium area, the central core of the building, as well as moving on into the what they call Building C, which is the 3rd component of the building, are all getting erected. The steel is getting put in. They've been doing some blasting over the past few weeks. We had a tour for a number of the building committee members over the last week, and I was lucky enough to be on site during one of the blasts. And the comment I made was that the munitions work they do at Devon's was louder than the blast from 150 feet away. So. The other thing I would note is that one of the sort of ceremonial items that they do as part of the completion of the erecting the steel for the building is what they call a topping off ceremony. And so those beams, those last few beams that are going to get placed in the structure of the building are getting distributed to the 2 elementary schools, to Gates and to Douglas, for all the students and staff to sign. And the 3rd beam will be brought here to the admin building, where the students in the pre-K program, as well as some local committee members, ourselves, and some of the other towns' boards will be invited to come and sign those beams before they get placed on the top of the building. Peter, is there anything else to add?
No, I think that was a great summary. 2 things of note. The steel on the school is actually scheduled to be done in May. So think about that. Like, the structure of the school is going to be up in May. So it's been a long road to here. That's a really exciting milestone. The other piece to be aware of is that the work on the new covered bridge is slated to begin in May as well. So that bridge will be inaccessible from about mid-May, late May, right through late August of next year. So that just, for citizens too, that's probably important to know. But it's going to be beautiful. The, building committee got to see some mock-ups of what that might look like, and I think that would be a really exciting addition to West Acton. So.
Super. All right. ALG met on April 8th. Is there anything to report, John?
Yeah, there's actually something that's unusual and I think also important. One of the things that was discussed at ALG was the ARP funding. So everybody remembers we had, the first round of CARES funding. And one of the things that Peter did is that he worked with the town managers in Acton and Boxborough to discuss, what might be appropriate to take from town funding and use for school activities. And, the town managers, were gracious in working with Peter in order to make sure that the total funding that the federal government had sent down was more equitably distributed between municipal purposes and school purposes. We have to go through that exercise again, but we're going to go through it with more money and a longer time period. And I think, like any revenue that comes into the system, there's a question about, what should the process be? Because this is unusual, there isn't really a great process for a group to get together and say, how many years should the revenue be distributed over? How should we come up with a decision about what should go to municipal purposes, what should go to schools? And so, at the ALG, I introduced that topic and said, well, we should think about how are we going to do this? And I hope that the BLF has a similar discussion. The good news is we've got a little bit of time. The first money isn't going to show up for a while, and there isn't the big, hurry to spend it. But I do think, it's an important topic. It's a lot of money. It's material relative to our budgets. And I hope that we can find a way to work with the two towns so that we distribute that money equitably between municipal services and school services. And other than that, there was just some brief discussion of town meeting, which, I think is headed toward being a one-night affair again, so which means that our presentation, again, will be a little bit on the abbreviated side.
BLF doesn't meet until Tuesday, and so we will not update on that. I actually already have the warrants open, so I move that the school committee vote to approve payroll warrants as follows. Number P2121, dated 4/8/2021, in the amount of $2,661,337.20. Payroll deduction warrants as followed. Number 21-021 PR, dated 4/8/2021, in the amount of $536,250.88. Vendor warrant number 21-020, dated 4/1/2021, in the amount of $1,514,882.97. And student activity reimbursement warrant number 21-020 SH, dated 4/1/2021, in the amount of $28,177.97.
Second.
Adam.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Yeben. Diane.
Yes.
Ginny.
Yes.
Evelyn.
Yes.
Kira.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Me. Yes. Is there anything else in the FYI? Our next meeting is going to be a workshop, and I think we're hoping to have everybody in person for that one on May 5th? 6th? May 6th. Yep.
Yeah, I will send out a little bit of pre-work ahead of that. We're talking 15 minutes worth of work, so don't worry. But you will get homework. It's something like that, but it does fit within the district's homework policy, so don't worry.
I'm concerned. I feel a little stressed now. Okay, homework. Okay.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Second.
Adam.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Yeben. Diane.
Yes.
Ginny. Evelyn.
Yes.
Kira.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.